sleepless nights, coffee houses, clubs and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, I still see your face. Buses roll, the distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away. Working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I'll see you in the morning light. Keep the light on as I drive on, singing our song. Keep the light on as I drive on, singing our song. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between.
All right, folks, welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris, right? So, what are we going to talk about today? Anomalies, Rich. What rabbit hole are we going to go down today? Look, there are anomalies. Joe Biden currently has a little over 80 million votes, and Donald Trump, popular vote-wise, and Donald Trump has a little under 74 million votes, just under 74 million votes. That would make Donald Trump the first president in history to get that many votes in the popular vote to win re-election. Of course, that would mean Joe Biden is the first candidate of any party ever, not incumbent or challenger either, to win the highest number of total votes nationwide, even though Joe Biden is the first candidate to win that many votes and lose that many counties. So in this country, we have time-tested principles, all right? Or at least in the modern era. Now, in the election projection model we run, it's a four-time rolling cycle, because the demographics of the country change so much over time that it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to always project older elections and superimpose those rules of thumb onto onto current elections, but there are time-tested principles that have held up for decades and decades. So what do I mean by an anomaly, right? Do I really deserve all of these Twitter marks, all of these disputed tags? Do others who are tweeting these anomalies really deserve Twitter tags like that? If you look below, if you're watching, if you're one of the couple thousand people watching on YouTube right now, underneath you can see where it says, because all of our videos do, that there are rigorous safeguards imposed on this election and that the AP has called this election for Joe Biden. Look, man, this is what anomaly means. Webster version, something that deviates from what is standard, normal, or expected. An example of, there are a number of anomalies in the present system. That is a very appropriate sentence to use here. Joe Biden won the most popular votes ever of any candidate ever in history. Yet, he lost the most counties ever for a winner. And these are counties that are important, very important. For 4 decades, there is over 200 what we call pivot counties in the United States of America, otherwise known as swing counties, whatever you want to call them. We choose pivot, like Ballotpedia. We always thought that was a much better, more appropriate definition. The state of Iowa has the most pivot counties. All right, so here we go. Let's just roll into this. With 31 pivot counties, Iowa has the most of any state that voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. Many of these pivot counties, folks, they have predictive value that dates back decades, not just the last 2 cycles, 3 cycles, decades. Bush v. Kerry, Bush v. Gore, Clinton, v. Dole, Clinton v. Poppy Bush v. Dukakis, and on and on. Reagan v. Mondale, Reagan v. Carter. These 31 pivot counties in the state of Iowa, representing roughly 26% of the current total statewide vote, have correctly projected the national election result more than 70% of the time since 1960. Since 1960. So what do I mean when I'm saying anomalies? And I alluded to this last week, okay? And I showed you this, the Iowa election results, okay? But what does that mean, really? What does it mean? Well, here's a new graphic, and we're going to put this into context a little bit. Here is the entire state of Iowa, and that bigger map is the current Iowa result. Donald Trump, 53.23% of the vote. Joe Biden, 44.99% of the vote. Third-party challengers are, of course, on the ballot, though they did not have the impact they had in 2016. Why? Because Hillary Clinton was hated. Badly, badly hated. In the top left corner, and Donald Trump was more popular, if you want to know the truth, in Iowa, even though he won slightly less than he did in 2016. And we're going to go over exactly where that was. But that had nothing to do with his strength or his electoral strength for re-election. It had everything to do with the third-party candidates and the third-party challengers getting more attention, more media attention, and they were less viable this time around. All right. In the very top left corner, what you're looking at in yellow are the pivot counties in the state of Iowa. All right. And we're going to go through their margins dating back to 2008. To the right of that map is the 2016 election result. Shaded areas, obviously, to indicate the size of the margin. There was only one county that remained deeply, deeply blue. The same thing is true this year. We only have one county in the state of Iowa, that being Johnson County, that went for the Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, by margins that Donald Trump carried other counties in the state, his largest of those margins, all right? And that was, by the way, just so everybody knows, big. It's 70% for Joe Biden, 70.81% compared to 27.43%, and that is in the southeastern part of the state. That is the result. I hadn't had time, and I really wanted to put it into an Everviz, but if you look into the Iowa pivot county margins and you go down state by state since 2008, you will see very clearly that there is absolutely almost no significant improvement from Joe Biden's performance against Hillary Clinton's performance. If you see this in light blue or blue, that is a county, the pivot county where Joe Biden increased his share. The rest are all Donald Trump increases. And if they are in yellow, they are demographically significant to the Midwest, meaning that Donald Trump not only won them, but he expanded his margins there. And that would matter. Why? Because there are counties in Minnesota, there are counties in Wisconsin that look a lot like them. Hell, there are even counties in Pennsylvania. Alamaki County went for, well, let's go back 08. In Obama's landslide, which they're telling you Joe Biden exceeded. Okay? He exceeded Obama's landslide 08 margin. He got more votes than Barack Obama. Where did he get these votes from? Welcome to the anomaly number one. He did not get them from Middle America. He did not get them from Pivot America, Swing America. What we are being told is that he outperformed Barack Obama in mostly black precincts. And I see this a little bit. Let me get off track real quick before we go down. I see this a little bit differently. People say, well, why are you trying to challenge the vote in the urban areas? Why are you trying to challenge black votes? Where you're asking for signature matches, aren't you really challenging black voters? Isn't that voter suppression? My answer to that is twofold. I want to see the signatures everywhere. I don't care if they're just in black. I want to see them in every county in these states that are being contested. I'm not just pinning down Wayne County or pinning down Milwaukee or pinning down Philadelphia or pinning down Allegheny where Pittsburgh is. I want to see them all. Because even in the reddest of red areas, Democrats count votes in this country. And Republicans better catch on to that real quick. And Alamaki went for Barack Obama by more than 14 points in 08. He slipped, although he still carried the state by 6 points against Romney. He slipped in that county to 4 points, a little over. Trump would go on to win it by 24 points in 2016. He went on to win it by nearly 30 this time around. All right, Boone County, almost 8% for Obama in 08. And then in 2012, he barely slipped, just under 7%. Yet Trump went on to flip that county nearly 14 points and then expanded it this time to almost 16 points. Bremer, very similar, only more pronounced. 9 percentage points for Obama in 08. He slipped to just under 3. Then it went for Trump by almost 14. And now it went for Trump by almost 16. In Buchanan, once a 19-point Obama county, went for Trump by 21 points, a 6% increase from 2016. So again, these votes Joe Biden historically posted did not come from middle America, and they did not come from swing or pivot America. Cedar County, which is in blue, one area where Joe Biden did marginally better. Trump's margin of victory, he carried it, but it was a little bit less. And I mean, Trump, just under 18 points in 2016. It went for Trump, but it went for him a little bit over 17. Why did we highlight this too, though? Is important because there are burbs there. So this significant slip in the burb is less than a point. Less than a point. In Cerro Gordo, he won it by just under 8 points last time, and he won it this time, Trump, by just over 6. And we can go down. I'm not going to go over every single one, but you see the pattern here. All right. In fact, Joe Biden, just because they're blue, does not mean Joe Biden won them. In fact, Joe Biden didn't flip a single pivot county in the state with the largest number of pivot counties. He didn't flip a single one. If it's in blue, it's because he improved, even albeit marginally, like in Jones County, where it went just over 19% in 2016 for Donald Trump. It went just under 19% this time. We're not talking about huge increases. There are no major swings here. Cerro Gordo is less than a point. Clinton County, once a 23% Barack Obama County, now a 10. It was 5% for Trump in 2016, and now it is 10% for Donald Trump. Des Moines County, once again, 23 points for Obama. He barely slipped there in 2012 in his victory over Mitt Romney, yet it flipped to Donald Trump by just under 7 against Hillary Clinton, and now it was just under 9 against Joe Biden. Dubuque County, There aren't many burbs in Iowa, folks. It's a pretty rural state. If they're highlighted, it's because we're supposed to consider this demographically significant. Where's the slip here? Little over 1 point in Dubuque in 2016, nearly 3 points in 2020. And I'm going to bring Robert here in a hot minute and get his take on this while he listens to me rattle these off. But again, the entire point here is Joe Biden allegedly posted the largest number of votes of any presidential candidate in the history of these United States. And he didn't do it on the back of middle America. In Howard, and I skipped some of these counties. Look at Clark. Once in Obama County, you thought Trump could do any better than nearly 30 points. He widened that margin to 36. Chickasaw, 23 points. He widened it to just over 31%. And I mean, there's multiple examples of this. And we could just keep going and keep going. Fayette County, just over 19%. He widened it to 23. Floyd, just over 14%. He widened it to nearly 20. Howard, about 20.5%. He widened it to about 27.5%. And on and on. Jackson, in yellow, once a 25% Obama County, now 26 plus for Donald Trump. Jefferson County, again, where's the slippage here? Where is the runaway of the white suburban woman? Once a 20+% Obama County. Trump barely won it in 16. If there was ever going to be a fluke of 2016, it would have been Jefferson County, where he barely won it, less than half of a point. And yet, with weaker third-party candidates on the ballot, who Nate Cohen told us was going to hurt Donald Trump this time around, Donald Trump actually expanded his margin in Jefferson more than threefold. I mean, Robert, I'm sure you listen and you can hear where I'm going with this. Where are the historic vote totals coming from is the point of my episode here, or this little rant. These are anomalies, Robert. These are counties, all right, 31 pivot counties, the most of any state in the United States. They have correctly projected the winner of the election more than 70% of the time over the last 6 decades. 6 decades. And yet Joe Biden slipped in all but 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And he didn't win any of them back. That's not the point. He didn't actually win any back. Maybe he did like a half a point better than Hillary. Comparable. But he still got stomped.
And is there an explanation? Because I'm seeing within states unusual movement. In other words, like the movement I expected to see is most of what you see here. That Trump would improve in working class populist America. Tennessee, Grundy County, I think he ran 7-8 points higher. Coal mining country. You actually voted socialist in 1912. And that gives you an idea for its history. And yet other counties in Upper East Tennessee somehow trended toward Biden. I mean, by small margins, but it's like, why? And those places that almost always go together somehow did not go together in this election for the first time ever in modern history. Western PA went a different direction, very slightly, but still a different direction than Eastern Ohio.
Reminds
Trump
me like
improves
Cedar
in
and
Youngstown
Jones
by 6 points, but goes down in Erie. That just doesn't make sense.
And that's why I highlighted some of these counties, Robert, go down a little bit. Worth, Winneshiek, right? These are northeastern Iowa counties. They back up against Wisconsin in these areas where supposedly Biden did a little bit better, right? So it just doesn't seem to make sense. What really makes sense here, or what again is an anomaly. That's why it's like the title of this episode. These areas move together. Clark and Union in Iowa, for instance, right? But then you have other examples like that they didn't. They kind of went a little, even though again Biden didn't win them, he just got like a little bit here, a little bit there, while largely getting stomped across the board. And isn't the explanation really more likely that these bucking the trend areas are all areas that refused to follow verification procedures, that ejected overseers and watchers, that didn't respect deadlines for reporting totals at the end of the election day? And for people who don't understand, I mean, you're supposed to tell people, and by that I mean officials are supposed to report how many absentee ballot votes you have. Each state is a little different, by say 8 p.m. that night. It depends. Every state's a little bit different, but in general, for some reason this year, we decided that it was worthwhile to put a moratorium on all of that. And, this idea that they couldn't handle it till later, Robert, I'm really getting sick and tired of seeing, because Ohio has the most strict rules for when people can begin to handle and then tabulate absentee ballot votes, yet they somehow managed to do it, even though they're the second largest Rust Belt state in the damn country.
I mean, no doubt. I mean, you're seeing extraordinary. My view is, if there was nothing here, the media would not be rushing to try to force a coerced concession without a contest and meaningful investigation. Biden's campaign wouldn't be demanding immediate access to transition resources without any meaningful contest resolution. I mean, W didn't demand that in 2000 after he had been certified the winner in Florida by the Secretary of State. He allowed the election contest proceedings to go forward first.
That's right.
You wouldn't have the media gaslighting and lying. I mean, I've been dealing with this Brad Heath, this hack, who's the legal news reporter, not commentator, not opinion editor. There was supposed to be the legal news reporter from Reuters, was the legal news reporter from USA Today. And he has been lying and gaslighting people all day, saying, oh, no observers were ever excluded anywhere. That's just made up, which is just completely false. Even the Pennsylvania decision that he was relying upon in part admitted that they were not allowed to observe. Ron Coleman responded because he was one of the monitors in Philadelphia who got excluded. And we had that absurd, asinine, ludicrous, the worst election law ruling probably ever in American history, when the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said something that the Secretary of State would laugh at if a foreign country claimed it, which was a right to observe does not include a meaningful right to observe. That's their own language. It means you have a right to look from outside the window and look into the cracks, which means you can't even see what's going on. You can't see whether the ballot is being properly marked, whether properly reviewed, whether the signature match is properly done, whether other aspects of the ballot are illicit. And this is what they excluded systemically in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And why? Their pretext for all this was the pandemic, of course. The pandemic means we can no longer do signature checks. The pandemic means we can no longer have witness requirements for absentee ballots. The pandemic means we have to send in all these massive mail-in ballots. Even the New York Times said in 2012, a consensus of election experts agreed that the moment we had a surge in absentee balloting, we would have a surge in fraud.
That's right.
I mean, even now they're trying to gaslight. And what you're identifying, more and more of this is popping up because people have been trying to tell me, oh, there's no anomalies here. And I say, I'm sorry. I keep finding more and more anomalies because I look at what my projections were internally and I will hit them for a whole bunch of counties. And yet the state somehow will have moved just enough towards Biden. And it's like, how did that happen? How do I hit certain numbers in Grundy County, hit certain numbers in these Iowa counties, hit certain numbers in Eastern, sometimes better than I expected? I thought Trump would get 74 million votes. Apparently, his data people told him 68 million. When is the Republican Party going to just fire all of these
losers? Right. That's right. Robert, is it or is it not true? And before we get in, because that's a whole other thing, speaking of anomalies, but you said something before that I want to circle back to, because I've been saying this for a week now to people. Is it or is it not true that if we were watching or observing a Latin American nation, right? That's some dictator we don't like a Maduro, or an emerging democracy in the Middle East that we were nation building, if that they conducted an election like this, where they stop counting in the middle of the night, right before, everyone goes to bed. And then we wake up and radically see large dumps of votes that are weighted one way, the ejection of overseers, the lack of verification procedures. Would the State Department not be blasting out press releases that this was a fraudulent election, that it was rigged, and that the people of whatever should deserve another vote?
Well,
how many of them have you read in your life?
No doubt.
I can't even count them.
My ultimate highlight of all this is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision.
Yep.
Everyone agrees. And on all of the international election law standards, the United States Election Assistance Commission, a neutral bipartisan commission created after 2000, been there since 2002 in the Hope Whatever Votes Act, that funnels money to secretaries of state and election officials all across the country. And it is the barometer that was supposed to set uniform procedures. It
That's
agrees
right.
and is in accord with the Election Integrity Project out of Minnesota. It is in accord with the international standards for election monitors and observers. And they all agree that any count, any recount, any canvass, any recanvass, any audit has to be open, transparent, public, easily monitored. They have to be able to meaningfully review it. That's
right.
the exact words the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said nobody has any right to is the word meaningfully review. This is a joke. Every lawyer and media hack on the left that is justifying that decision has admitted that and is exposing they are a fraud. They don't care about honest, open, transparent elections. If I was in any foreign country, I will be citing US 2020 as a reason for the State Department can't say diddly. Can't say nothing. Your own courts, your own election system said you don't have a meaningful right to observe. So why do we have to give a meaningful right to observe? It is an absurd decision, it is an embarrassment. And the fact that so many election lawyers are justifying this, excusing this, shows that they have become nothing more than political hacks willing to harlot and whore their principles simply for the advancement of partisan power. And it is a disgrace what is taking place.
I amen to that. And I've always, Robert, over the last 4 years, it's like everyone who was shouting about our norms and our institutions and and how much damage have these people done to the norms and our institutions? The moral authority, they just flush down the toilet. We will never be able to to have any moral authority over any of these other nations when this pops up again. We just not 10 years ago, we're calling for a nation in West Africa. Exactly down the line, you stopped counting at this time. You didn't let the opposing party observe the ballots. It is a third world show, man. This is a third world show.
Even a third world show would. Brazil just had an election.
They
got all their votes counted on election night. Brazil. And in California, they're still counting. They're still counting in California. This is an embarrassment. And the fact, what's even more embarrassing to me is I get the media hates Trump. I get they want to railroad him. But they're setting precedents that are far more damaging to our institutions than anything they've ever accused Trump of doing.
There's nothing.
This is serious, lasting. We have the highest number of Americans who believe this election was stolen than ever in polling history in the United States. And that number is going to go up, and that number is going to stay solid over time because they're seeing courts come up with it would be one thing if courts gave a real hearing and it turned out, heck, we just couldn't produce the evidence. Maybe we suspected it, but we couldn't prove it. Like dead people, because some people don't have dates of birth on their election records. And so consequently, you can't finally cross-check. And it's possible somebody has the same last name, or it's possible they find somebody who says they have the same name. Whatever the story is, I think this 2/3, at least half, 2/3 probably of Trump supporters would accept the outcome. If they're like, we got a fair hearing, we got a fair trial, we got a fair process, we don't like it. We think they stole it legally. We think they use the reduced rules and all the rest to do it, but c'est la vie, we got our chance. But that's not what's happening. Not a single time has a single court allowed any evidence to be presented in an evidentiary hearing, other than in Michigan, and all he did was take pot shots and make up facts afterwards and belittle the constitutional provision for which he was criticized by 3 Michigan Supreme Court justices later. All the other courts have refused to allow any evidentiary hearing while taking pot shots at the evidence that they refuse to hear. I know.
It's one-sided.
And then let the media gaslight everybody and say, all the courts have rejected this. My favorite response to that now is, and from 1890 to 1950, every Southern court rejected civil rights too. That just tells me who had power. It doesn't tell me what truth was. It doesn't tell me what justice was.
It's like letting a criminal take the Fifth Amendment on every incriminating question you ask him, but then letting them defend themselves with the questions they want to answer, right? So you can't take pot shots at people. I mean, these are people, Robert. These are people, and many of them are Democrats. I mean, if the media would cover them, then it would be, I think, horrific to the American people, because some of these are really bad. And I mean, these are guys. There are officials in these affidavits. I'm not just talking about some Republican activist who wanted to be a poll watcher and said he was cast out. There are officials who are saying, listen, they trained us to cheat. They trained us to do this. Not only is this real, we knew it was understood. We had to do it this way, and backdating, all of that, this is just totally out of control. And the long-term damage that they're doing here, Robert, is enormous problem. Like you said, I get it. You hate Donald Trump. You're willing to do anything to get rid of him, obviously, which is my entire point with when people ridiculously say that fraud cannot be committed on this kind of a scale. That's nuts. First of all, the amount that you could have gotten away with just from putting the hate that they've put against this man into the population, right? So you got him. How many ballots did you get, Robert? 6, 8, 10, or requests, right? You could have.
Yeah, there's multiple requests, and I got 2 official ballots.
See,
not my name, from people who hadn't lived here in 10 years.
So
How did that happen? Now, that happened in Nevada was one of the worst cases because of but as you warned for months before, and to be clear, the New York Times said election experts in 2012 agreed with what you said. They said absentee balloting has always been the highest risk of fraud. Jimmy Carter said the same thing in 2005. Democratic Party in Georgia in court proceedings said the same thing in 2009. Election observers and election experts have been saying this forever until 2020, and it became time to cheat for the right cause. And as you put it, what they did was they outsourced the fraud. They didn't need to have a bunch of corrupt insiders anymore. They could someone could create drop boxes, register a bunch of supposed people, send in mail-in ballots from those places. No signature checks were ever happened. We know that happened in the tens of thousands in Georgia alone from Matt Brainer's research.
Yes.
And by the way, how incompetent are the 2 senators running in Georgia and Ronna McDaniel as head of the Republican National Committee, who they're going to lose both of those Senate seats if they don't reverse things fast. They're not even themselves. I told them when I was down there, both of you should file suit to at least stop this from happening in the runoff. And instead, all the same thing is happening in the runoff. They're doing drop boxes. They're not removing any of those people from the rolls that they know don't belong on the rolls. They're not filing a single suit. They're not challenging or contesting anything. People should see from Pennsylvania, if you don't sue before the election, they won't let you sue after the election. Right. So they're not doing any. They're going to blow the Senate and blow those 2 seats because that's how incompetent the entire Purdue political machine is. And, little boss hog Sonny Perdue sitting in the Secretary of Agriculture's position should get off his rear and do his job. I saw him down there do nothing for 2 weeks except undermine the Trump campaign and fail to protect his own cousin's Senate seat. That's how embarrassingly incompetent these rubes are.
I tried to tell people who were calling, like, hey, can you tell me what's going on here? Can you tell me what's going on? I tried, because they're getting frustrated now. It's to the point where, like, the state Republican Party are getting very they have some pretty, especially some of the newer elected legislators.
And I want to be clear, the head of the state Republican Party, fantastic guy.
Yeah.
If he won office, we'd be a lot better off. If some of his pals would have won office, we would have been a lot better off. They lost to some of these schmucks who won. They've been great. Who's been bad? Ronna McDaniel has been bad. She went down to Georgia and she was like, well, we haven't seen any of this kind of fraud or that. Why do you? It is insane. It's almost, you should know by now from the Obama experience and the Trump 2018 experience that Trump voters generally do not turn out unless Trump's on the ballot. Now you're giving them a motivation to stay home on top of that. This is just incompetence. Obviously, Ronna McDaniel has become the Romney part of Romney McDaniel. And it's embarrassed. Their RNC has been incompetent in this whole stage. They've been fraudulently raising money, claiming it's going for election contest litigation.
That's right.
Not.
That's exactly right. Taking to Twitter and going, big win, and we're appropriating 25 million more to defend election integrity. We got a big win out of Pennsylvania today. We got a big win out of Nevada. It was a load. And that is what really is, it's really the most disgraceful part about all of this. People should understand before they give their money to these people, okay? They had no idea what they were talking about. They still have no idea what they're talking about. I have to repeat myself. I wish Laura was here. I really do. She'll tell you how many calls from the same idiots, and they're like insulting and send their number twos, right? And I have to repeat myself to the point where I'm just like, listen, you guys want to get your stuff together. I'll do this at 2:00 for all of you morons one final time, because how could you even be in the game this long if you don't understand this level? If you're not on this level and you don't understand what they were trying to do with the drop boxes, if you don't understand why signature verification, that should have been fought to the death, I mean, how easy it is to commit mass fraud without verification procedures.
And how are they not suing now? And when these ballots are about to start coming in for the runoff
already,
how in the world are they're going to let it happen again? And within a month, and then they're going to lose the Senate, party. And then we are in a troublesome situation. You give Democrats control of all three branches. Oh, good luck with what that's going to look like. They are going to try to pack the court. They are going to try to add Senate seats. They're going to try to pack the Senate. They're going to try to pack the House. You do whatever they can to pack power across the board. And so that's where like people have said, hey, maybe as a protest, people should sit out. No, even though I'm not big fans of either Republican Senate candidate in Georgia, they are a massive improvement over what a Democratic Senate looks like, controlling the House and the White House. But they are going to blow it. They have the same campaign team who all got their jobs from incestuous relationships to the Purdue family.
That's right.
They're all incompetent. They completely blew Georgia. They sat there and lied to my face and a bunch of other people about what they told the campaign compared to what is true. They sat there and lied about helping out on the recount when they weren't. So these people are liars. These people are incompetent. And they're the ones running. The Republican National Committee is putting them in charge of running the two Georgia Senate campaigns. They're going to, if McDaniel loses this, all these people are going to get fired. RNC people should get fired. These Senate, all these campaign people need to purge all the professional class types from the polling arena, the public, from any form of campaign advisement. If you've had a meaningful job in the last 10 years, you should never have a meaningful job again in all reality.
I feel bad for guys like
terrible.
Yeah, I feel bad for guys like Mike down there that are really, I mean,
and there's good David Schaefer's doing great work at the head of the Georgia Republican Party. There are good younger people I met there who are doing fantastic work. But the people at the top are liars, frauds, and incompetents.
They're not getting any help from them, Robert. They're doing their own
In fact,
thing.
They're shutting them down. They're closing them out.
No money allocated to preventing this. No money, hey, listen.
Which is insane. Insane. And by the way, I mean, people like me, because I've gotten various criticism from saying, well, why don't you put your hat in the ring? Two things. One, I can only do so much for free forever. That's just right. A practical reality. There's a bunch of people that depend on me making sure I make money for the firm, other people that work for the firm. But secondly, I did actually donate a bunch of my time for several weeks and being down there.
Yeah.
And there's good people in the White House trying to do good work. There's good people connected to Trump trying to do good work. They're mostly being shut out by a bunch of rubes. And God bless Rudy, but he should have been limited to the PR side. God bless Sydney, but she doesn't know election law. So they needed a bunch of different election. Why? Harmeet Dillon would have been fantastic. Didn't have to be me. It could have been a bunch of people.
I don't understand.
They should have hired you and Matt Brainerd out of the gate.
Harmeet has experience. I just don't. I don't understand. And then
because the corrupt establishment wants to make sure nobody skilled comes in the arena, so they actually benefit from people that are inexperienced being there. When I was down there, there was backroom wars against me the entire time I was there. So the Secretary of State's office lied routinely. The lawyers for the Secretary of State were supposed to be the lawyers. For Trump.
He's a liar. He's a liar.
His office lied. Gabriel Sherman, he's a liar. He also lied about the statistics about signature matches. I'll be able to prove it. I'm probably going to take a Georgia contest case.
Why don't you tell people what you're doing? Because I saw your tweet. Why don't you tell people what that was for the sub? Because look, this is something they should support, honestly. So what are you doing?
So I'm probably going to go ahead and volunteer my time and help out on a Georgia election contest and be co-counsel with a variety of lawyers down there to challenge the presidential election, to finally try to get a real signature match check, to get a meaningful ballot review, to look at these ballots from people who are not qualified to register. The Free America Law Center, which I helped co-found, is going to help cover costs. because we have filing fees, service of process fees, other fees, and that are going to be associated with the case, just so that we don't. I'm not paying for things out of my own pocket.
That's
As much as possible.
falc.org, right? Falc.org, isn't it?
Yeah. www.freeamericalawcenter.com.
Okay, there you go. All right, yeah, because that's a worthwhile venture, folks. I mean, there's so much of these. I don't know how many messages you're all getting a day saying, help us put this to the contest this, help us do that. I've been speaking to the people on the ground for weeks about this. They're not getting any help, so I don't know what the hell these people are talking about. I don't know.
No, it's terrible how they haven't hired these people. I didn't go this route because I was hopeful that the campaign and all of the money that was being raised in the name of election defense would actually go to election defense, and I could contribute what I could, but there would be enough to cover cost, and you wouldn't have people forking money out of pocket to pay for signature matches to occur, to pay for handwriting experts, to pay for ballot digital evidence, to have available your and Matt Brainerd's evidence. And unfortunately, they don't care about this at all. Romney McDaniel has not been focused on this at all. She was given the opportunity to get involved, has refused, has often misled the president about what the RNC is actually doing, has had the RNC is paying some people down there in the name of the Trump Victory Fund, none of which is going to Trump victory. It's going to these political hacks connected to Sonny Perdue, who don't know what they're doing, who don't have any skill set, who are incompetent at their jobs, who are getting to keep their jobs, and they're misusing your money for their pocket.
Yeah,
and it's just embarrassing.
Understand, folks, that I have been called multiple times and asked to do something for nothing, and they're like, "Sorry, we just don't have any of this money appropriated to us." We understand the correct place to be looking at all of this, but the people who have the money are off doing some crazy, they're not on board.
They're doing another bad set of numbers for the Georgia election.
That's all.
What I was like. They have all these high-ranking data people there with massive data access who sat in a room and promised to help out, and an hour later were not doing so. Said that they were just going to focus on the runoff. Still being so incompetent to not understand that how this election and the recount and everything related to it was handled was going to be the number one factor driving the runoff participation rate.
Of course.
These people they all should be fired. If I'd been given that authority, I would have gone in and fired every single one. It would have been a summary execution. It would have been St. Valentine's Day in Atlanta. But I mean, it's just embarrassing how bad it is. And I haven't even said anything about this until now because it's finally reached a ridiculous culmination point. Their party failed didn't even file. Now, so I think some voters got together with work I did.
Because you told them anyone had standing.
Got filed in Pennsylvania, but the party failed to. How did the party fail to? What is Romney McDaniel doing? How does she not even know when to file a Pennsylvania election contest? Right. How does the campaign general counsel not know when to file this? The level of legal malpractice for Trump is off the charts. And I don't blame Rudy for this. He came in at the end, and he's the media guy. He's not a litigator anymore. He hasn't been for 25 years.
He was never a political guy either. It's not like, everybody who's got a law degree. He's a guy made for
One American News Network, do some news conferences. That's it. Trump has got stuck relying upon him because all of his other lawyers turned out to be traitors or unreliable. And the outsider lawyers, now reality, there's a bunch of outsider lawyers he should have been bringing into his camp 4 years ago, and he's been late to the game. Now he started to bring them in, but not enough, not quickly enough, not full. And I understand why. These are all people he doesn't know. So everybody he's hired that he doesn't know over the last 4 years has screwed him at some point.
Yeah.
So you can see why he's not, Rudy, he's known for 30 years. Everyone else, hold on a second. So I understand why, and I understand Rudy's a sole limelight kind of guy. He's not a share the stage kind of guy, and Rudy won't acknowledge that he's in over his skis when it comes to election contest.
I don't think he'd ever do that. I just got off that thread immediately. I'm always willing to help someone or talk to someone about. Well, here's where you should be looking. Here's what matters. I've been trying to nail. Don't reinvent the wheel. What are you doing? Don't reinvent. And then you got to see these threads, Robert. I mean, really, if I was a lesser man, I'd put them up right now. You got to see these email threads that what the hell are you talking about? I mean, they go off into this I don't even know what to call it. It's not a lack of focus. It's a complete misunderstanding and they're completely misguided. And they really need to learn. Like you said, you donated some of your time, and the things that I've been asked. Man, there's a little something called in-kind campaign contributions. Like you cannot cross that line.
Right.
Where and it's like you can't.
And the way
what are
to
you trying
do this
to appeal to my patriotism. So
was
like,
they
I'm
should
gonna
have
take a
created a
charge.
one-stop shop election defense fund
Of course.
that was separate from the campaign, so it wasn't subject to campaign finance
Separated.
rules.
That's exactly
There's a way to do that. Let independent people run it. That's you hire you hire Matt Brainerd, you hire other people, you do both a PR campaign and a database campaign. Because one of the things they should have been doing was hiring polls to go out, showing how Americans want signature matches to occur.
Yeah,
Americans want
ourselves.
recounts to be monitored. Americans want the process to be transparent. Americans want computers to be less involved in future elections. So these are all things that the media has been able to, because here's another place where pollsters lie, everybody. Notice all the polls that don't ask that question since election day.
That's exactly
I guarantee you those questions would have been all over the place if Joe Biden was the one contesting the election.
Sure.
Just go back and look during Bush v.
I was
Gore.
just going to bring that up. Remember the intent? Remember
Well, remember all the law professors
how things
who wrote
change.
articles about how the electors could vote the way they wanted, how the state legislature could send. You know what else those professors said? Those professors said that the vice president, when he opens up the certification, can just unilaterally make a decision that's a plenary non-reviewable decision about what the electors really are, that it's not a ministerial obligation. So under their interpretation, Gore could have opened up the ballot signatures and certified himself president. Because in fact, that was actually probably was going to be the case in 1800 had it gone a certain way.
Somebody was going to ask, somebody asked a question here, and I wanted to bring this up because I think I saw you mention it on Laura's. Like, I have Laura sending them to me so we don't miss all these super chats like last time. But somebody had said, what happened in the I think you tweeted about this. So what happened in the 1876 election where it wasn't decided until January 18th, and that could apply. And could that apply in this election? And let's
March
just say this
2nd.
before. That's right. I was just going to toss this to you. Like, you look at Brad and others who are talking about gaslighting the hell out of people. A certification is nothing. I mean, not that it's nothing. It's a
certification, and this is where the gaslighting has been bad. It's also again where Trump's PR people have been behind the curve, and it's because his campaign election people are behind the curve. They should have been educating everybody up front that certification is simply of the election, not the electors, and certification of the election triggers your right to contest that certification within the state court process. And it's only after that there's certification of electors. And the certification of electors is followed by electors meeting. And what can happen is it happened in 1876. Two different groups, the Republican election officials certified that the Republican had won. Democratic state legislators said, nah, here's our group of electors. They voted for the Democrat. And you had 4 different groups of electors go up to Congress. And there's still no easy resolution for this. There's a statute that claims whoever the governor certifies is going to be who it is. But that's only a law, and it's not necessarily a constitutional law, as even liberal legal scholars have acknowledged and admitted. So the process next is you have, after certification, you have state election contest. After state election contest, you have a second level certification of the electors, but then that goes to the electoral college. The electoral college, they can have, the state legislature can send their own electors and certify them up. Congress doesn't actually certify until January 6th. And then they can actually contest it in Congress. And if they contested in Congress, what happened in 1876 is they contested it in Congress. And back then, Inauguration Day wasn't until March 4th. And they didn't decide until March the 2nd by one vote. And then the way they decided it there was the House voted in total on the rather than by state delegation, because the issue was contested election as opposed to lack of a majority of electors. There's a good argument that they should have gone to state delegation right away, which is what they did in 1824, and partially what they did in 1800. So but definitely in 1824, because the 12th Amendment was passed because of 1800 to avoid it from reoccurring. So but these people that are just gaslighting, saying, oh, nothing to see here, all the courts have ruled it out, certification is final. they're gaslighting you. And why gaslight if they're all so confident that there's no fraud here? If they're confident there's no fraud here, why scared of an audit? They're confident no fraud is here. Why scared of a manual recount that can be meaningfully observed? If no fraud here, why scared of a signature match check that can be independently confirmed? Not one county has allowed it to happen in the entire country yet.
We're not even through in Georgia, for instance. We're not even through Fulton. And you have to go back and look at some of the other, because it looked like in 18, because we're comparing past cycles, looked like there was screwy stuff in 18 too. I got news for everybody. But yeah, because it really looked like 18 almost was like a dry run for some of this stuff. That's what we're starting to
You had
find
magic over performance in a bunch of seats.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to figure out, I was like, how did I win my Senate bet on the nose, which was a 5-1 Senate bet, and lose the House bet? And I was like, this is, these two things shouldn't really go together. And then when I started breaking down the House seats, I was like, how are House seats right next to each other in Illinois? They're almost identical demographically. The Democrats get like the perfect extra margin they need just to win those seats. I was like, maybe it was money. Maybe it was big tech algorithmic manipulation targeting those areas. Or maybe it was anomalies with absentee balloting and other things that was the early test run. 2017 was definitely a test run. They stole it from Roy Moore out in the open. It was just nobody cared about Roy Moore. You're seeing what happened to Moore is a template for how they're running this to Trump. They're saying, Trump, like Moore, hated within the Republic, or disliked within the Republican judiciary, disliked within the Republican political establishment, disliked by the media, enough to say, don't look, don't look, don't look. I mean, and how do you get nursing home turnout at 95% ever? But how do you get it at one nursing home in Georgia at 95%, and down the street it's at 20%?
Yeah.
How did that happen? And what did the New York Times in 2012, back when they were worried because Republicans used to vote absentee, by the way, they're afraid that Romney was going to use absentee balloting to beat Obama. Romney never either had the balls or the brains to do that.
No way. Never would have.
No, never would have.
What did Obama say about it? What did he say about it?
Always look for when the shoe is on the other foot and discover all the interesting things these same media people, the same Democrats and the same law professors and the same judges even said, because they said very different things back then. But particularly they admitted what they called granny farming. They said this is a major problem. Nursing homes have one sole plate. You just need one person to steal all the ballots. That's it. Whoever is in control of the mail or has access to the mail can just go through and fill it out for all the candidates, all the folks in the entire nursing home. And some of these are big nursing homes, folks, and send them in. And especially when
quite a few votes, especially in areas where you see a couple hundred to a couple thousand flip the county or something like that. It's not as I really have a hard time with people who don't seem to understand how easy it is, because it is. Under this video right now, you see that stupid little tag on YouTube that says rigorous safeguards. Whatever rigorous safeguards we had were removed.
Joke.
It's a joke.
There were none. They removed them all. There were no rigorous safeguards.
Total joke.
They completely removed them. That's more gaslighting. And this is where, I'm not a QAnon fan. I don't think places that Sidney Powell has gone have been productive. I don't think parts of where they've gone in the Arizona hearing have been
necessary. It's just not at all
necessary. It is. But I see why people embrace it, because they see the media lie to them so routinely about such basic
Nothing
things.
would surprise them anymore.
When you tell Ron Coleman, another one that they're lying about, which we should go into detail, is there were no dumps. There was no late reporting. Any late reporting that did occur was because they were forced to by state law. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw 98% of all of these rural counties reporting, and less than 60% of Philly reporting, less than 60% of Pittsburgh reporting, less than 60% of Detroit reporting, less than 60% of Milwaukee reporting. Meanwhile, somehow Cleveland had reported. Somehow Broward County this time had reported. Right. There was no late rush to votes. How does this? It magically happens. But first they lie about the fact that it happened. It indisputably happened.
Like they did with Broward all the time before we got rid of Brenda. Before they did with Broward all the time. They would make excuses for her too, and make excuses for why there would be miraculously 35,000 absentee ballots that would somehow not only show up late, but then show up late and not follow the split of the other ballot dumps that we had in the same areas, the same precincts. But what was maybe, 65-35 suddenly turned into 75-25, even though they supposedly came from the same precincts, which is another thing that immediately should raise everyone's BS alarm. the lack of precinct data, the granular precinct data was like, once you take that kind of information away from someone like me, it's like you don't want, I immediately, I'm a cynic a bit now, and I immediately say, why won't you give me that? You don't want me to know which precinct is outstanding and which isn't. So maybe you could explain to me that was a different margin because Ward 66 made up that 36% in Philadelphia or whatever. I mean, it's just, okay, then give it to me and show me, right? And then they're playing all these games to run out the clock. But I'm still haven't gotten the correct answer in Georgia, which after speaking with Mike down in Georgia, he was like, we're getting all these things on these records canceled for administrative cause, canceled for administrative cause, canceled for administrative cause. And we're trying to ask these people whether or not these were absentee ballots from military people, right? And they can't even give us simple information like that, and not even a good definition of what that means. And then also this time around, as we saw in certain counties like Fulton in 2018, we're seeing incredibly high percentages of people whose absentee ballot was either canceled out because they showed up on election day, or they were forced to fill out a provisional because they wanted that absentee to stand. It happens sometimes, there are mistakes, and you can expect that to happen sometimes, not at the level we're seeing, folks, not at the level we're seeing.
And it keeps breaking in too much of a partisan pattern.
Absolutely.
I mean, like when Matt Braynard finds all these people illegally registered at a mail drop, and every single one of them votes by mail. Just the historical, the odds of that are next to nil unless it's a bogus operation.
Right.
Because if it's somebody just saying, look, I'm in between places, I'll list my USPS mailbox address as my address because I'm in between. Some portion of those people will, like everyone else, vote in person. I mean, in Georgia, it was a minority that voted by mail. Even Democrats voted largely in person. Probably about half voted by mail. To get 100% voting by mail at a particular location tells you that's a fraud. If the FBI was doing its job at all, they would have already investigated those people.
Robert, I haven't gotten a damn call, and they supposedly went and got the stuff that Matt had. I sent Matt stuff. So he was like, hey, you mind sharing that? I was like, no problem.
They got it the same way at the end.
I haven't gotten a call.
At the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, that the U.S. government recovered the Ark of the Covenant. They said they were really going to investigate it now. Remember? They stick it in that huge warehouse where everything else is, and it's buried in the back. That's what the FBI is going to do. They went to get Matt's stuff so they could bury it. So that they could, and so they could later on say, yeah, we did an investigation and weren't able to find anything. But what they'll probably do is they'll leave the investigation open as long as possible, so that when you do a FOIA request to find out whether or not they actually did an investigation, they say, oh, it's an open investigation. Kind of like Hunter Biden. It's an open investigation, so we can't tell you what we failed to do. It's just every part of the system is. And then the Arizona governor just last week said, I'm not going to certify until these legal challenges are resolved.
That's right.
What does he rush to do this morning while the hearing is being held? This shows you how much he was a slap in the face to Trump while the hearing was going on. Didn't even wait for the hearing's conclusion. Didn't even wait to listen to the evidence. He rushed to certify it and say how great Arizona's election was. Included in that election is someone who everybody acknowledges didn't vote but was listed as voting. An African-American, likely Democrat, who had moved from Arizona to Tennessee many months before the election.
Yeah, he was on Fox.
Was listed as voting in Arizona. And he went on Fox and everywhere else and said, I didn't vote in Arizona. I voted in Tennessee. So how did that guy vote if the signature matches are strictly enforced, like Garrett Archer and some other people are trying to insist to me? If this happened, then let's take a second look. Nobody should be scared. These records are supposed to be digitized, is my understanding. Look at Georgia. All the ballots are digitized. He said when he gave $106 million to Dominion, he would release all of the digitized ballots to the entire world. He would publish them publicly so everybody could feel confident about an election. And that was one of the great reasons to give all this money to this single company. And has he done so? No. Why hasn't he done so? He promised 2 weeks ago he was going to do a recount, recanvass, and audit at the same time. He never did. Why are they scared of the signature matches? Why are they scared of election contests? Why are they scared to release the ballots if there's no problem in any of the three? Why did they exclude observers if there was nothing illicit going on?
Understand, Bush never fought Gore on whether or not they could go over those ballots and decide whether they were legitimate. What they disputed him on was whether or not a canvasser could infer a voter's intent by the hanging chad, right? So remember that. I mean,
particularly when a lot of the counters came from one side of the on the political aisle.
Robert, they were locking people out of the damn rooms. Republicans were trying. By the way, it's all right for George W. Bush to have people trying to ram through the doors of the election officials in Miami-Dade. They were like teaming up and just shoulder bashing the doors, trying to break through physically. That's all right.
Roger Stone was organizing and orchestrating part of that. They understood political theater. Look at how the Republican establishment rushed to W's defense.
Absolutely.
The corporate law firm,
everything.
The local
Fox
activists,
News.
the Fox media. All of those rushed to W's defense, embraced W. In fact, now, truth be told, if Roger Ailes was still alive, he probably would have Fox going crazy over this election.
He probably would. He was
key to what happened in 2000. And because, and what's Fox doing? They're not even covering these hearings in Pennsylvania. They're not even covering the hearings today in Arizona. But of course, this was always an inherent weakness. The weakness in Trump was that it was more about a man than a movement because he won so quickly. And so consequently, unlike Andrew Jackson, he didn't get screwed the first time. And because of that, he never had to build a machine. And now he's suffering the consequences of that. A bunch of judges he himself appointed, Federalist Society judges, are the ones screwing him in the federal court system.
Yep. Absolutely. And, that goes to, there's a couple of questions here I'm going to circle back and get. So, Joel, what about the 100,000 plus ballots in Wisconsin, absentee ballots that don't have corresponding requests as required by Wisconsin
or the 100?
law?
I mean, they put 167,000 people they claimed were suddenly indefinitely confined.
I was going to bring that up for people
which is almost 10 times the highest number ever in the history of the state. And for people to be clear, COVID was not considered indefinitely.
It was
confined.
not. And that is something that they went after Matt on that too. He's absolutely right. It is the norm, folks, is maybe a couple thousand. I mean,
the highest number in history of the state was 18,000.
18,000.
The highest number ever.
Okay. Yeah, I believe. That I talk, but it's been as low as, like 1,500. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And in the past, it used to be like 1,000 to 2,000.
Yeah.
What is the Democrats have gotten good at creating or at organizing the nursing homes. They're good at making sure Granny gets the vote right. And if you really think that's Granny's vote, good luck with that. That's what would be good. I think ultimately what needs to be done is a massive data file check. This will not be possible within the context of the next week or two, but I think over time, we need to start building a master voter file and start pulling those indefinite voters. Or those irregular voters.
Yep.
And start looking at where unusual turnout occurred, because I think it will start to overlap even in places like Iowa. We'll see places that are demographically similar. We see these counties trending 5, 6, 7 points Trump. Find a county that's like it demographically that somehow didn't trend Trump. And I wouldn't be surprised we find some apartment complex with unusual turnout, nursing home with unusual turnout, because I think they did this systematically across the country. Because I think in part,
I think you're right.
They didn't want states to look weird. I think the only place they had trouble doing it was 2 states, Florida and Ohio.
Well, I was just going to say the ones that got away with these moratoriums. I don't know what else to even call them, but really, we're talking about those 6 states most specifically. But even in the craziest of areas, and by the way, it looks like Kenosha probably is one thing that we're looking at now. Those last ballots that came in, those last minute absentees that tightened Trump's margin in Kenosha, they were overwhelmingly for Biden, and we're looking at where they came from. It's just it's crazy. And by the way, that was on a tip from somebody who said, listen, I'm pretty sure my vote got tossed. I don't know how to track this stuff. That we're getting all over the country. They even did it in there is even problems, which we've confirmed, in very blue states like Delaware. So there's this group. I don't know if I got to tell you this yet, but there's this group of voters. They all work at this hospital. And for the most part, of course, they're liberal. There was about 17 of them that voted for Donald Trump, and everybody voted by absentee ballot. Ironically, they were like, listen, even the Biden supporters were like, we don't like this, and we want someone to tell us whether or not this happened, because if this happened, they're angry. And that's what I have to tell people. Like, even Biden voters are going to dislike what they learn about what happened here, because this group was absolutely appalled. I mean, they're still their coworkers, and they're like, their vote should not be disenfranchised. all 17, Robert, who claimed and told us they voted for Donald Trump, all 17, their ballot never made it, was not counted, was not tabulated.
And that's what, Brainerd got statistically
17.
significant data on all these categories of people who say they didn't request a ballot and got one, people who say they sent it back in, but it was never received, people who say that someone else must have cast a ballot for them because that person didn't. In some cases, dead people, because the widow answered the phone and she was like, no, I'm pretty sure he didn't vote that way because he died 4 months ago.
Dead. Yeah, and we're getting those people who showed up and their ballots, they're like, oh, no, you voted already. And they had a challenge. No, I did not. I'm here to vote. Those were overwhelming. The only way to do that, folks, that's why this takes so long. The only way to do it is to pick up the phone and call them. It's the only way to find them, or email them if you've got an email record.
Give Brainerd credit. I mean, as you know from polling, it's almost impossible to get a response rate anyway. And how many people want to get involved in the middle of this?
They don't.
So you add that you're not going to get many people. He got more people than I thought he would.
Yeah,
because he was getting, the thousands of people to respond ultimately and confirm things, and even a fair number of them willing to sign affidavits, which almost nobody wants to do.
Yeah,
they don't want to put themselves in the middle of that limelight, particularly in the cancel culture environment. And so there's no question it happened on major scale. And notice what the law Twitter and the Democrats and the media types, they're not talking about Matt Brainerd hardly at all. They're not talking about any of the work you did hardly at all. Yeah. And it's because they can't refute that. So they pick the more extravagant claims made, or where they get some things mistaken. I mean, like some of the anomalies they got wrong. And this is why I've been trying to encourage all the election Trump team folks, be very careful with filtering. And there's some really good White House people that have been re-emphasizing and reiterating this. Be very careful filtering information to make sure we don't get caught saying something that's easily disprovable, because then everything else we put out there will be discredited.
Which is why I was a little ticked off with the Epoch Times. Look, I'm going to let them go and slide on it, but they were not supposed to release that list. Right. And they didn't release the list, which I give them, but they were not even supposed to publish that anything remotely. They supposedly had people locally. I thought they were going to chase down, because there could be explanations for some of this stuff. There absolutely, and I'm even willing to hear people out. The problem now with that, by the way, is that now that we're winnowing down that list to get different people, there is no doubt that PolitiFact ran to the Secretary of State and had some specific records. Maybe it was either PolitiFact or somebody from the Detroit Free Press. All right. And they gave them to the Secretary of State and local officials. And now some of these records are being deleted. So the only way we can prove that, because we took screenshots, and I'm dying for PolitiFact to do something, because I'm dying for them to refute this, because, not only us, but the other guy we got involved, he did it too. He thought to do it too. I mean, it's a good thing bringing somebody else in. I'm not by nature a fraud investigator, right? So bring in somebody who does this for a living and he thinks to do that. Like, listen, they will play games. Don't you dare put anything beneath these people. If they in fact did something wrong, people try to get away. They don't want to get caught. So they will try to cover their tracks. And sure as hell enough, Robert, I mean, the PDF right now of screenshots is huge. It's huge. I mean, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. These are people that you remember that front-facing public site for Michigan where you could type in somebody's name, their date of birth, their zip code, and it would tell you whether or not they returned an absentee ballot. They started deleting records for them. And the only way we can prove that now is by those screenshots, because they are actually deleting them. It's nuts. And in Pennsylvania, they seem to have an excuse for why they altered some of the absentee ballot information. But, and again,
we should look at forming some sort of organization, kind of like what Brainerd did temporarily, his voter integrity project, but some sort of election fraud project. And we team together, come up with the best legal strategies, come up with the best legal reform proposals, come up with the best investigative methodologies to sort of detail and because I was curious how this seemed to be like both so concentrated and so scattered. Yeah. Like you look at Georgia, and there's when I first saw the Georgia state map when I was down there, one of the things I asked for that somehow the election people could never come up with was, I said, assume you guys had projections prior to the election about every precinct in the state, and at least
Which they
county.
always do.
Yeah, apparently not. Now that might be because they were telling two different stories. They had told one story before the election, a different story after the election about what their forecast predicted. So maybe they had buried their forecast. I guarantee you their forecast didn't have certain precincts going certain ways. But I was looking at it, in places like North Georgia go in different directions.
Yeah.
And it's like, that just doesn't happen in some of those counties. Rural South Georgia,
right,
like next to each other. One went for Trump by 4 or 5 more points. One goes for Biden by 1 or 2 when they're the same demographics.
Yeah.
And that's when I started figuring out, okay, it was selective places. It's kind of like internal vote fraud, where you have to rely on that poll worker being inside the precinct. And that's why the voter fraud will show up with anomalies between precincts. Here, I think the reason why it showed up is because there were certain places people were willing, it may have been outsourced, willing or able to commit voter fraud, and then a lot of other counties where they couldn't. So like I knew Dade County has a pretty clean reputation for a range of reasons, and it looks like a total normal election. Trump's up. There's no big drop-off from president to Senate voting. There's no anomalies. But a couple of counties over in Whitfield, which has a different reputation, anomalies start showing up. And it's like, this is and this is happening everywhere. I'm seeing it. That's why I say I think they tried it. But this is why we know they probably tried it everywhere. It's because they outsourced it. Yeah. They outsourced it to let people take their own action. So the whole reason to say Trump is Hitler, as you were talking about earlier, was, I mean, wouldn't you be morally obligated to try to steal an election from Hitler? I mean, wouldn't you have to do so? And all you need is enough people who feel that way, who have access to do so, because the election has removed all the safeguards. You've left the safe open and the front door open and gone on vacation and figured, well, nobody in town will commit a crime. Maybe 99% of the people won't go in and rob you, but 1% will. Because the 1% was everywhere. And by the way, Mark Elias had threatened secretaries of state and election officials everywhere. I found out his allied groups or groups allied with him did it in Tennessee. That gives you a state they had no interest.
It's money for them. It's money for them, Robert, too. I mean, that's why, we were talking about this a little bit, I think, last week, but it's why, some of these undervote things that we've actually seen indictments with. I mean, they're selective because it's a business for some of these people. So, and I think, too, it's just a matter of, you can create a lot of reality winners out there, right? So this is a woman who worked for the NSA. You had somebody who worked for the Senate Intelligence Committee for forever. He was the guy, both parties, right? But if you create this hatred and then you give these people this feeling that they're actually the hero in the story for breaking the law, it's amazing how many people you could set in motion. It really, because there's just no way with what we're finding. There's just no way in some of these areas there wasn't some kind of coordination with these election officials. According to Michigan law, a voter registrations application with those who are registered in person with their local clerk, right, in the final 14 days before an election, to include election day, because a lot of these ridiculous excuses are same day voting, all right, who do not provide residency verification or a driver's license, right, such as a personal ID, whatever else kind of an ID, they must hold that application on record. Yet, I just can't seem to find them. It's amazing. The interesting There's thing no way they didn't do that without help, Robert.
It appears these are like white urban voters. Like apparently it's not coming from the African-American voter precincts in like Philadelphia, Detroit, or Milwaukee.
But they're coming from them as cover.
Exactly. It's coming from like it's coming from unusual places. And that's where I'm thinking, okay, if they didn't do it in mass, or they couldn't even gin up African-American turnout. They did it by using apartment buildings, mail drops, and nursing homes. And if they did it that way, then it was more spread out and it wouldn't pop up as easy. That's why it shows up in like it would be smart of Stacey Abrams' organization to organize. I mean, here's why we know those were fraud, by the way. They listed those places as apartments. And by the way, Matt Braynard just looked at the U.S. Postal Office drops. He didn't look at all the other mail drops.
Yeah.
There's tons of other mail drop operators. He just looked at the those. He didn't look at every other one because it's harder to get that data.
it's understandable.
It's going to be
decision.
fivefold. There's at least 100,000 people registered illegally in Georgia, is my guess, based on the available statistical evidence, and they were deliberately listing their post office as apartment number 122. I'm sorry, that's not accidental. That's not a mistake. That's still, and almost all of them, apparently in some cases, all of them, voted by mail. These are fake ballots, is what this is. This is an orchestrated organ, and it wouldn't surprise me that it would come from Stacey Abrams. Because again, Stacey Abrams, according to the Democratic Party in 2018, got an unusual overvote for presidency.
Yes.
For the governor, and now almost the identical overvote in the identical areas. And it would make sense. It would be smart if I was going to commit voter fraud like this with mail-in balloting. It would be smart not to do it, or even by fake registrations with people I get dubious IDs for. Remember, their fake IDs are not hard to come by. And so that's why it'd be useful to audit the poll watching books, poll signature books, things like that. What else you can audit. It would be smart to do it in these kind of concentrated places in suburbs at, little strip mall locations, because that's not going to pop up as easy. I mean, whatever it is, like Michael Tracy was saying, oh, look, Atlanta just really was the suburbs that moved. So there's no anomaly here. There's still an anomaly. The anomaly is that the Atlanta suburbs moved more than any suburbs in America.
Yeah. I mean, if that was going to happen,
higher in margin than neighboring areas.
If that was going to happen even too, Robert, we would have saw that in other comparable areas, even in Texas.
We would have seen it in Charlotte. We would have seen it in Charleston.
Yeah, that's right.
We would have seen it in Tampa. We would have seen it in Birmingham. We would have seen it in Nashville. We would have seen it in Cincinnati. We would have seen it in all the places that are at any level, like, or at least we definitely would have seen it in Philadelphia. I mean, here you have the Atlanta suburbs moving 12 to 15 to 20 points.
But
from
Bucks
2016.
County, he barely eked out, and he did so only with a last-minute late dump of all mail-in ballots that broke for him overwhelmingly. So, and I mean, ridiculous.
The suburbs in Charlotte only moved like 4 points.
Yeah.
The suburbs in the Research Triangle only moved about 4 points. The suburbs, even in Northern Virginia, moved like 6-7 points. The suburbs in Wisconsin, 6-7 points. Suburbs in Cincinnati, 3 to 4 points. Suburbs in Cleveland, 3 to 4 points. So it's like, why weren't all the suburbs moving together? They're moving at totally different rates. And how is it? It's that, like, they needed exactly a certain number of votes out of the Phoenix suburbs. They needed exactly a certain number out of Atlanta suburbs. And magically they got both when they got nowhere near those numbers in any other set of suburbs that are demographically similar or culturally kindred anywhere in the country.
And that was the point of the exercise in the beginning of the show. So we would have seen these in Clark, in Union, in this would have happened, and it just you're asking me to swallow a whole lot of like historical just a whole lot of anomalies and historical firsts.
Exactly. I mean, everything is unprecedented. Someone like Biden winning is unprecedented.
Yep.
All of the historical factors that I went through before the election said, this would have to be an unprecedented win for Biden. But it ended up even being more unprecedented in the results, because it would be one thing if all the suburbs moved together. They didn't. It'd be one thing if he actually lost ground amongst white working class people. He did not.
Licardo, this is a great time to answer your question. Which group did Trump lose support with? In truth, none, because he got more votes. All right.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly right.
They're trying to tell you he lost with men, but it's not really true, because it's that you're changing the proportion, right? So
he got almost 20% more votes than 2016.
Yeah.
Almost 20. And if you go county by county, precinct by precinct, almost everywhere he got more votes.
Yeah.
So all that happened was magically just the right number of extra Biden voters came in than has ever occurred in the history of the country.
All late and all with mail-in.
And selectively in swing states and selectively in key regions. So like in Georgia, he won in part because he got absurd numbers out of Atlanta suburbs, including both in terms of raw votes and in terms of margin.
Yeah.
I mean, 15 to 20 point movement in Atlanta suburbs, where that doesn't happen anywhere. The closest is the Dallas suburbs, and even it doesn't get as high.
That's what my point was with Dallas. You actually in Texas, including there, you have the only two metro areas that are growing faster. So why didn't you see not only even a comparable shift, let alone one that was that exceeded Atlanta? And it makes you, what you were talking about before with Stacey Abrams, it's important to remember some context here. Stacey Abrams took a lot of money from a lot of people and convinced them that she could beat Kemp, or really Democrats could flip Georgia in general, with nothing but essentially voter registration drives and changing and expanding mail-in balloting, right? So when you talk about the drop boxes, all of it, right, it really does seem like this was something that they were just trying to expand that pool in Georgia right now. This is the worst it's ever been. There are more than 1 million in a state with only 6.6 unique individuals on the voter files. There is more. And by the way, they're trying to say 5 million voted. I mean, so that's the turnout, right? But there's another 1 million in dirty rolls. 1 million, folks. Over 1 million, about 1.9 million. That's crazy. And think about that when you remember her talking about voter suppression and purging the rolls. These rolls are very dirty in Georgia. So I don't know what she was talking about. Her beef always would have been with local Democratic supervisor of elections in blue areas, in Fulton and DeKalb. That would have been her beef anyway, but they didn't do it, is my point. They just didn't do it. Everything she said they did is untrue. There are tons of people, 135,000 alone in Fulton County, who have a change of address flag. That means there's always more, because the state takes forever to find out that you are gone, right? So if they think 135 have a forwarding address, 135,000, that means it's more, folks. It's more. If they think a couple thousand are dead, it's more, because the state always takes forever. And we're supposed to believe, Robert, we're supposed to believe that none of these ballots were rejected. 0 in Fulton, almost 0. Almost.
Yeah. And by the way, Gabriel Sterling, the
crazy
hack over at the Secretary of State's office, who lied for weeks, or his office lied, his representatives of his office lied for weeks, but to the state and to me, who appears to have got the signature match check numbers wrong. He said the signature match check was about the same as in the past. It looks like he completely screwed up the numbers. And that's part of the reason why I'm for doing a meaningful election contest down in Georgia and make sure that happens, even though I believe the campaign will do so. And I know some people have brought them already. But add to it to make sure a real signature match check occurs. Because I want the same standards they apply to nominating petitions by election officials to apply here. Because if they would do that, then there's just no way there's not at least 1 to 2% of signatures that don't match. And that's all you need in Georgia in the elections in doubt.
It's over.
And what is going on with the governor down there? I mean, how incompetent? Why is the Georgia Republican Party is literally the institutional people, the 2 senators, the state legislators, the Secretary of State, Lieutenant Governor, and Governor are burning the party to the ground in Georgia as we speak.
Yeah. Well, this is what I was told directly from a bigwig, a top guy over there, that basically it's a couple things. One, that they've been living off, and I've said this too, they've been living off the goodwill of the Republican voter in that state, in the face of rapidly changing demographics, that they are out organized badly, and the governor is a coward. He's a coward. He's that kind of.
Everybody said that. Everybody said he was a coward.
He's a total coward. The guy is Chicken Little, and that basically that he's afraid of them, and that in a nutshell, he comes from a breed of like Southern Republican. This is how it was explained to me, who had the advantage of living in what was always thought to be a red state, so they didn't have to do the tough fighting. They didn't really ever have to get into the trenches and fight somebody like a Stacey Abrams and the tactics of somebody like a Stacey Abrams. And here she is, having to explain herself 2 years after losing about what all of this money, she's willing to do just about anything. And he is just not a formidable opponent to stop that. He's just not. He's a chump. I'm not trying to, taunt the guy or mock the guy. This is how his own party describes him. They want him gone, Robert. Bad. They want him gone. Well, he has made no friends. They want him out.
I mean, they're in serious trouble in 2022.
Big time.
if any of them, lieutenant governor, governor, secretary of state, run, but they're endangering the Senate. Like if either Loeffler or Perdue were smart, at least one of them would come out and say, I will join a member of the House. If elected, I'll join a member of the House and object to the election and the certification of votes from Georgia unless a signature match verification occurs. Come out and say that, and then they'll get a lot of the Trump vote to come out. Put Trump on the ballot by saying, I'll be able to object on January 6th if you elect me on January 5th.
Right.
That would be the way to do it, and maybe then they can they're going to have to come
Avenge
up. But of
the
course,
steal.
I met all their campaign people down there. They're all incompetents. They're all rubes. Their polling people are a disgrace. Their data people are a mockery.
Horrible.
I hinted to some of those guys down there that, given who had sent me there, they should pay attention, and that their futures are going to be on the line. Well, I'm going to deliver on that promise. So a lot of those guys need to get canned, need to get fired. Needs to start to be a campaign to get them fired. And the rest, and more pressure needs to be turned. Apparently, more heat needs to be turned up on these folks because they're still clueless.
Yeah,
it's just extraordinary.
Right. That's exactly. I like this idea, and you brought it up before. This is what we have been talking about. That really there needs to be an advocacy group for election reforms where you come up with the best possible public policy proposals. You conduct polling to show how much widespread support there is for it, because there is. And then it's got to come down, because all of these people care about Robert as being reelected. And it doesn't matter if you have an R or a D next to your name. You do not support this, we will defeat you. We will work to find somebody, and you will be gone because you're not as good as us, and we will beat you. It's that simple. So, that's the only language these people speak. And it's sad, but it's just terrible. It's really, it's terrible.
The only thing they care about
is
their future jobs.
Brainerd
so you have to make some stuff for a price in their future jobs so that others get the deterrent message in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. That really is the only thing they care about. And I know that's terrible, but it's true. And the rally cry down there should just be, avenge the steal. It is Trump today,
well, and you could
still
tomorrow. Because Congress can always object no matter what's happened up to that point. All that's required, they've created a law in 1887, which is constitutionally dubious. But putting that aside, what the law says, because in my view there's a lot of different ways to contest an election, but in Congress, and it should always go to a state delegation to the House by state delegation whenever it can be contested. Yes. And I think that vote should be by state delegation by House. It makes no sense to say, if there's a contested election, we'll vote by state delegation in the House, but then allow somebody else to vote on whether there's a contested election, because you effectively remove the power of the House to vote by state delegation by just redefining what is and isn't an electoral college majority, that's the problem with the current law as written and crafted. And if the right congressman wants to try to bring a challenge, I'd be game for it. But either way, under the existing rules, if a House member and a senator both agree to object, the House and the Senate have to meet and discuss the issue for 2 hours on both sides and then vote on it. Now, because of that, right now it's majority vote. You're not likely to win the House because of it, but at least you force the process. The one that would give Trump a possibility, keep Trump on the ballot, would help Republicans win the Senate in Georgia, to get more Trump voters out when they're really disinclined to right now because of the way the Republican Party elected officials have handled it in Georgia. But secondly, it makes Pelosi be the one to stop Trump from getting elected. And make it go that route. Make it go the path, because that helps Republicans and helps Trump long term. Even if he doesn't get in, it's Pelosi and Biden stole it. That's a good narrative for Trump.
There is no risk here. There's no risk.
If these people had an IQ over other than people at the country club and at their cocktail parties,
that's all.
Would be like, oh, how could you be for that?
That's exactly right. And there are some who are afraid of the media response and that you are afraid of the wrong response. You should be afraid of your base getting so pissed. There have been whole coalitions that have evaporated over the lack of your will to fight for them. And these guys don't get it.
Nope.
Trump
They
gets
still don't
away
get it.
with so much because he is willing to fight for the people who support him. And when nobody wants to follow cowards, nobody
No.
wants to follow somebody who doesn't have the courage to fight for their own convictions. And they just don't get that. They're
That'd be a
never
good
going to
headline
learn.
for this episode. Nobody wants to follow cowards.
Nobody wants to follow cowards. That's it. It really is. And this is what they're shaping up to be. And the only good news for Republicans is that at least there is like some breed that get it. They're just not the ones who have the ability to do something. Or even worse, too, they're not the ones who have the ability to redirect all of these efforts, because I want really know how much money has been wasted. You know, I mean, having the nerve to call people and ask for them to donate their time and donate their resources. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I won't even pick up the phone anymore.
Yeah. Well,
I
I
won't
mean,
even pick up
I'm
the
getting
phone
to the
anymore.
point where I'm going to let Ronna McDaniel know I'll represent people to sue the RNC for fraudulent advertising if they don't start allocating the money they raised for the election defense to election defense. Because people like you should have been hired months ago. People like Matt Brainerd should have been hired right away. Other people that are doing great work should have been hired right away. A variety of people like Harmy Dillon should have been hired right away. The fact that they haven't is a disgrace. And they failed to do their job. And when I saw her do that disaster of an appearance in Cobb County over the weekend, where, of course, a whole bunch of Trumpists showed up mad. And they're like, if this last election was stolen, why should we go out and vote? Because we know the runoff's going to be stolen.
They're catching on to the grift. They're catching on to the grift, Robert.
And she's like, oh, we haven't seen any evidence of this kind of fraud. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You're not giving that stupid line again. You can see all these people now that they think Trump's about outside the door. They can just go back to the old McCain-Romney Republican Party, just like that dope governor of Arizona. I mean, that guy today, it's what Ted Cruz did at Republican National Convention in 2016. I told a bunch of people that are close to him at the time, I said, if you guys do this, his presidential career future is done, finished. If he goes out there and doesn't endorse Trump, you don't, and they gave me crap. Well, of course, by October, Ted Cruz was on his knees begging for Trump to support Trump. But now the same with all these people. Anybody who did not stand with Trump at this time period on the right has no more national aspirations, may not have any future aspirations of any kind.
Don't kid
They
yourselves.
do not understand how this will be a defining time for the Trump audience and the Trump base.
Don't kid yourselves. Don't, ignore that at your own peril. You are not going to run, Nikki Haley. All right. I mean, you can run, knock yourself out. You're not going to get anywhere. All right. I mean,
it's just like any Republican who backed the lockdown, any Republican who backed the steal is disqualified from future higher office.
And I will say this, Robert, because this is worth saying. Those who argued with you and I about that lockdown are just as much to blame, because they use this as a predicate. They use it. They tried to commit economic suicide.
If Trump doesn't go along with the lockdown or forces, but he likely wins re-election. If the lockdowns don't occur, I guarantee you he wins re-election. He not only gets to protect his economy, but he prevents all of these mass mail-in balloting and this fraud that could easily occur solely because of the panic in response to the pandemic. All the people who said panic, and frankly, so did Steve Bannon for a period of time. Will Chamberlain, other people said panic, panic, panic.
Yeah.
Well, guess what, folks? Here's the result. The result is Trump fighting to even stop a steal from occurring. So the position he would not have been in, he would have won outside the margin of fraud, but for the bad advice of those individuals.
Yeah, and because people have to understand, when you have this much time that they had, there's so much you could do. You could even find yourself on election day, because it is true. Here's another anomaly, by the way, or not even an anomaly, but people should understand that by Joe Biden's own numbers, his own campaign numbers, he was headed for a massive defeat on election night. That is why Hillary Clinton said, don't concede. His own numbers in Pennsylvania, if they didn't, whatever you want to call it, find, miscalculate 700,000 ballots, all right, he was going down by about a 200,000 vote margin. They're on press calls 2 days before. That's
They
right.
publicly said if Trump hits these numbers in these states,
We're
well, the way
done.
they put it was Trump has to hit these
Yes.
numbers in these states to
And
win.
it's not going to
He
happen
exceeded those numbers everywhere. He
everywhere.
also exceeded the turnout numbers for those everywhere.
Yep.
And that's why you can go back and find that what Richard recommended for everybody to do before election night was watch some of these media people's Twitter feeds in live time. Go back and watch what the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel political reporter was saying in Wisconsin. Go back and look at what they were saying on CNN at the time, and John King and other people were saying.
Crying.
They were all saying, oh, there's not enough votes here. There's not enough votes for Biden to make it up. And then magically, they arrived. It was like the people who, in Broward County, who didn't get the message from Chuck Todd in 2016, who kept saying, well, we're waiting on Broward. We're waiting on. It was tough to get these many votes out of Broward, but we're waiting on Broward. This time they got the message. They're like, oh, we need to get 6% more. Oh, we need this many more. Oh, and again, what explains why they couldn't count right? They said on election night they had this number of ballots. A few hours later, it was suddenly more. And then a few hours later, it was suddenly more. And then places like Georgia and Pennsylvania, it kept being more and more and more and more day after day.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
In Pennsylvania, in Allegheny, in both Allegheny and in Philadelphia, what we were, or less so Allegheny, because those numbers did change. But in Philadelphia, we were told we were looking at about 650, maybe a little more. And then as it stood, it was looking like very much like Hillary Clinton. Biden would get around, 5 and change, and he'd fall shy statewide. And then in Allegheny, not as bad, but also close, where it didn't look like he had the numbers. And then what they told us is later during those 4 a.m. dumps and even in the 20 with Pennsylvania, 72 hours later, right? I mean, this went on for days. In the end, they told us basically that they had found or miscalculated, and it wasn't about 650, 670. They had 12 to 18% that more. I mean, this is the amount.
And it's what they did in Georgia.
Yeah.
Every new day,
It's just every day.
suddenly more ballots, and then suddenly more ballots, and then suddenly more ballots. It's like, how is that? The only place they had an accurate count was Arizona, and that's because those were mostly Trump votes that were out. So there you didn't have, oh, look, 10,000 more. Oh, wait, there's 17,000. Oh, wait, 30,000 more. How can you not count? Like in Florida and other places, the internationally recognized standard is that you report all ballots before you start counting the actual ballots.
That's right.
You tell the world how many ballots you have at the close of election. So that
category.
No ballots can magically appear throughout the next night and the early morning and the next day and the next day. But that's exactly what we had in Pennsylvania. That's exactly what we had in Michigan. That's exactly what we had in Georgia. That's exactly what we had in Nevada. And for anybody like Brad Heath to say that's totally normal, only in the sense that corruption is totally normal in some of these places.
Is that where they're really headed? I mean, that's the only explanation for making a ridiculously false statements like that is because you're trying to normalize it. Because for many, 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 many years, everybody knew what that meant, Robert. Everybody knew what it meant.
Republicans don't have the cojones to steal it back. Yeah, I mean, that's the only reason why they're not. In 2012, they were worried that Romney might steal it through absentee ballots. That's why they were warning about the great concern for absentee ballots. And by the way, all the concern now about software, Democrats were saying that in October. Democrats are the ones that don't like this software. They were going to accuse Trump of rigging the vote through the software. And so Trump just reversed the script, which drives them crazy now. But now go back and watch the EST report on Georgia and Dominion 1 month before Election Day. See what they were saying then.
And that very same guy, Robert, who was saying
they're trying to memory hole it now. They're like, well, what are you talking about? Like the New York Times, August 2020, they run a piece that like says, where does Trump come up with all these concerns about absentee balloting? Pretending that they themselves didn't write the exact article detailing these problems in 2012. I mean, they hadn't limited the Wayback Machine must be a huge drag for these people because, you can go back and find the actual printed article.
But they just choose to just ignore it and Charlie Mike and move on.
Because their audience doesn't care. Their audience buys up the lies.
They
soaks
do.
Up the lies.
They want the lies. They want those lies. They enjoy them. They need that. It's like an affirmation. It's really just nothing more than a cognitive kind of bias, right? And look at New York,
and
by
that's
the way.
why we've always been straight, even if it means going against something people may want to hear, like,
Yep.
the Dominion Venezuelan stuff is really going to turn out to be the golden hammer that crushes,
Right.
when we said that's probably not going to hold up. It's because it's important to establish a record with your audience of being accurate, even when it's against your interest.
Right.
This is an exception to hearsay, for example, in the rules of evidence, is when you say something against your interest, it's more considered to be likely to be true, such that it may be included as evidence, even if it's hearsay.
Yeah,
That's why we've told you straightforward facts, even when it was may not have been what you would want to hear. Same about QAnon aspects and other things. But the left does not do that. They just feed them the crap, and they keep eating the crap. And it's part of the issue. But these anomalies are everywhere. I mean, Richard and I were talking about this for months prior to the election. We said, what would you look for if you found fraud?
Yeah.
Well, what would you look for? You would look for the big Democratic areas with a history of ballot stuffing sitting on their ballots.
Yep.
And that was happening on election night. That's why I was telling people, get out of the betting markets. It wasn't because I thought an honest absentee ballot surge was about to occur. It's because I was like, there's only one reason they're sitting on all these ballots, and it ain't a good one. And that means the steal is coming. So sell now. And the people who did, they're on a locals board, the vivabarneslaw.locals.com. I created it for the purpose of being outside of these censorship echo chambers. And people have done great work in there. This guy created a website called hereistheevidence.com to crowdsource information, crowdsource evidence, crowdsource affidavits, crowdsource statistical reviews and you can look at it and decide for yourself. You can say, I think that's credible. I don't. I think that's reliable. I don't. But it was and he created it because we created this one little internal forum of what Twitter was supposed to be for, what Facebook was supposed to be for, what YouTube was supposed to be for, what Periscope was supposed to be for. We have to use locals technology because it's run by Dave Rubin, so it's free of censorship, because these other people are manipulating to it. They put a warning label on Trump's Instagram photo of his kids. They put down there, by the way, the election has been contested, but it's like, this is so clearly it's automatic on anything Trump posts.
It's
Trump
automatic
put out there. Biden won
the
the election, and they would put a warning label on it.
Robert, there's no doubt that there are people who are just getting that now. I mean, every video that we put up, I mean, if you tag it election, whatever, and it's us, we're getting it. I mean, that's it. And it's not really like a dispute. It just says, hey, read about how the election was really safe here. That's what they're doing to me, right? So it's ridiculous. And by the way, it's the AP.
It's Orwellian Big Brother. I mean, it's newspeak. I mean, when I saw that Pennsylvania Supreme Court case and then saw legal news hack reporters like Brad Heath repeating it, and I was like, this is right out of Orwellian newspeak. By the way, the no election monitors were excluded from observing the process because election monitors have no right to actually observe the process.
It's crazy.
Well, hold on a second. That doesn't mean that means they were in fact excluded from reviewing the process.
Depends
so
you
have to look at it. You're like, did you actually say that? I mean, this is something out of us. This is satire. This Orwell. He did think it was coming because he saw what was happening in Russia and in the Ukraine starvation. He was partially motivated by that himself. As he famously said, he was fine with socialism if you could just get rid of the socialists. But he became brilliant. But I mean, we're seeing it in live time. And do they not understand that ordinary people are going to push back on this? They're losing record numbers of people. They're not going to. In fact, more and more, the number of people who are doubting. This is the first time ever in polling history.
Yeah,
the number of people doubting an election is going up instead of going down.
That's right.
It's incredible. Over 40% say it was stolen. It's around 43 to 45%. And not coincidentally, even Harvard had Harris X do a poll, and they admitted it was directly correlated to lack of signature matches occurring.
Yep, I saw that.
As they hear, and this is why I was, it's okay to do the computer stuff and all the rest, but ordinary people, when you tell them something very simple, like, by the way, the only check on fraud is to make sure the signatures match, to make sure someone didn't steal Granny's vote. But they won't allow anyone to check the signatures. Everybody is like, what?
Yeah, because it's just common sense to them. It's just good old-fashioned common sense. Speaking of which, with the PA legislature, this is, I think you mentioned it before. So, PA,
for everybody out there,
28 now, I think, that say they will
not. You can lobby all your state legislators. In 1876, Republican election officials controlled ballot certification in every single one of the contested states. In every single one of the states, they threw out a bunch of ballots that they thought were the product that were illegal ballots.
Yep.
Because they thought they were a product of intimidation, coercion, or fraud, or simply were not legally cast by a qualified elector. The Democratic state legislatures responded by sending their own electors and certifying their own electors to Congress. So that's why who certifies the election didn't decide anything in 1876 and legally is not binding. It's not binding on the Electoral College. It's not binding on Congress. It's not binding on state legislators.
Yeah, you circumvented the decision. And Crusader, I mean, the answer to that is yeah. I do think that's probably a great viable path. I mean, really, I mean, if you want a historical first, it's an uphill battle for this guy. If you want him to do something outside of the box, that's the way to do it. It circumvents the decision for the Supreme Court, doesn't it, Robert? I mean, the bottom line is you're not a faithless elector anymore.
You can have SCOTUS can decide the issue, but ultimately it always comes down to Congress. And that's where my view was, okay, Pelosi can probably railroad him based on the current interpretation of the election law they passed in 1887.
Yep.
But make her do that.
Yeah.
Then the Republicans are in line. Then Trump is aligned. Then the Trump and Republican base is aligned. It's good for Republicans. It's good for Trump.
Nothing.
It may not be great for the country that we have a senile nut as our president. Who keeps falling down and hurting his ankle. They blame the dog.
God, unbelievable.
But it's better than the alternative of coercing a concession or abandoning and absconding your duties as state legislators, governors, secretaries of state, state Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, or state legislatures, which is going to allow the Democrats. That's what the Democrats want. They want Republican establishment to betray Trump again. Because they know if it does, it will crush Republicans in the Senate runoff and give them complete carte blanche control.
They're dying.
There's so many morons, incompetent people running campaigns in so many places that it is at risk right now. It is more likely to occur than not. When you're seeing the governor of Arizona, who definitely had presidential ambitions, torch his future.
He's done
because he rushes to certify something he doesn't need to certify that he said a week ago he wouldn't. You get a sign of how incompetent these people are.
And Long wants to know if PA were to throw out those mail-in ballots, I guess you're talking about through the court, Joshua, I imagine, right? Just correct me if I'm wrong. Could that have an impact on the 4 House seats were that close? I'd have to go out and overlay that. I mean, that you're talking about a blanket throw out. They wouldn't do that. They would do. There are specific absentee ballots that are at issue. So
and the other thing they could do is they could say those elections are in doubt, and technically that tends to throw it to the House.
Yeah.
The other thing they can do, remember what they did in North Carolina? Democrats didn't prove that there were more votes in doubt than the margin of victory. Didn't they only have like 7 absentee ballots they could prove were fraud?
It's incredible. It's incredible how the double standard is, Robert. All they did, and we could do much more simply by randomly pulling those lists. We can absolutely demonstrate a much more systemic problem here than Democrats did. But what they did is really no different than what some of Rudy's team has done, which was go out and find a handful of specific instances, which is the right course. I guess as with anything else, Republicans and Democrats have different standards, different bars to meet, I guess. I mean, should not be right, but I think we're only talking about a handful. Now they were alleging it was worse, and here's our 5 or 6 to prove it, or I think, or whatever it was. But I mean, that's why I told people don't reinvent the wheel.
For people who don't know the background, in North Carolina, Republican wins. They find out that this guy that's been doing absentee balloting fraud, mostly in the context of Republican primaries, not in the context of general.
Not even the general. Yeah.
That there were a few absentee ballots that may have been fraudulently produced by him. And on that grounds, the very morally righteous North Carolina Election Commission, coincidentally dominated by Democrats, says we have to throw out this entire election. If there's a hint of fraud anywhere, then the entire election has been contaminated and we must order a new election.
Yeah,
why don't we have that same standard now?
Yep. That's exactly right. I mean, and this is a presidential election. This is not I don't understand. This is one thing where I get people's frustrations because I don't understand why Clark County can say this election was corrupted and we're going to have a new election at this local level, but we can't touch the presidential election result. Like, I get people's frustrations there. The presidency is the most important, or at least, I mean, should be considered when you have a top of the ballot on down. I don't understand how it's harder to invalidate the result, Robert. I don't get that. Maybe just because of precedent, because it's never happened.
Well,
because of cowardice, I guess.
It's because the name is Donald Trump.
In this instance, yeah, you know what? You're probably right. Because could you imagine if Al Gore had this much proof? Could you imagine whether or not they would never have?
Those Democrats in the Florida Supreme Court were happy to come up with crazy standards just to get them over the top in Florida.
That's right.
That was the backstory. The trial court judge was a pretty independent guy, a relatively nonpartisan guy. He was like, okay, no, what you're asking for is too much. We should do this, but not this, so on and so forth. Because if people don't know, Gore basically wanted selective recounts of selective counties using subjective selective standards by Democrats counting ballots without them being effectively monitored. That's what it was. He kept saying he wanted to count every vote. He just didn't want to recount any of the Republican counties. So that was his definition, to count every vote. So the state court judge was like, no, there's some problems here. So Gore appealed it to the Florida Supreme Court, which said, absolutely, let's give you the whole candy store. And because they went too far, like this Pennsylvania Supreme Court has been doing, that's why the U.S. Supreme Court got involved. They're like, this is obvious. This is just trying to steal it after the fact. Go. We're not going to let you do it. And contrary to what you're hearing out there, that was a state contest where no federal issue was raised. The U.S. Supreme Court said it involves the presidency. That means it involves a federal issue. It involves the electors clause because there's issues about who's passing the rules here, legislature or judiciary, and it involves also equal protection due process once you give someone the vote. But they didn't rely just on equal protection. They also relied on the federal safe harbor law. They asserted federal jurisdiction. If the Supreme Court wants to do something, they can. If the state legislators want to do something, they can. If the governors want to do something, they can. And if Congress wants to do something, they can. They all have constitutional roles to play. The problem is they're all scared to do it on behalf of Donald J. Trump.
They're cowards. That's exactly. I mean, really, there's no other way to put it. And with what you were saying before, pretty much everybody I told, do not, like you see, Rona and the rest of them on Twitter, do not single out Wayne County. Do not single out Milwaukee. First of all, you don't know that it will only happen there. In fact, I can show you that it did not.
It did. It happened. I can already across the board. In fact, they were smart about it. They didn't use the places they typically use to stuff ballots. They used other places to do so, knowing that it would slip through the radar screen.
And that was the beauty of getting all of these moratoriums. It really was. I mean, the idea that you could massively expand the pool. Look, I mean, even in the, and I refer to these indictments because they show you how this stuff does happen even on normal election cycles. It does. This idea, Rob, it drives me nuts. No, there's no fraud. There is always fraud. That was never the question of whether there was or was not. The question is how much and whether it had an impact on the actual result. I just know that you have more time and availability to this, to the ballots, to different people that put all of this in motion, then of course you could rapidly expand them. It's stupid.
Well, yeah, and this is the other check I have. The counties and states that either I know personally who runs those counties or states, know their history, and counties and areas that we're not seeing any of these anomalies. It's counties and states we don't personally know where we're seeing anomalies in places that don't make sense compared to comparable demographics. So, I mean, and it's all over the place, and it's within states. It's counties next to each other. It's not just the big urban counties.
That's right.
The big urban counties counting late was a cue that they were going to try to make sure they got enough ballots for Biden, because that's the only reason you do that. Contrary to what Brad Heath is gaslighting you on, nothing prevented them from accurately reporting the total number of ballots they had at close of the polls. Nothing prevented them from counting those ballots in the same time frame all the rest of the state was counting those absentee ballots. The fact they went through election day ballots first did not mean they had to magically be later than everybody else reporting in the state.
Yeah, that too is also the bottom line. That these ideas And if you're a wise ass, I will block you. If you want to make funny little things, that's no problem. But I don't block too many people. If you got blocked, it's because you deserve it. Anyway, the bottom, you hear somebody laughing. Yeah, the bottom line is these excuses, Robert, that they didn't have the time to handle. That's nonsense. And then it doesn't explain why they were just simply wrong, right? So, for instance, let's pull up here.
And
hold on, let me
it
get
definitely
you
does explain the contrast with like Ohio. As you mentioned, Ohio had the same protocol and the same procedure about timing of counting of ballots. They didn't have any of these problems.
Yeah, I'll get specific numbers here. I don't want to be wrong with anything here, but on the absentee ballot numbers, we had what they were supposed to have by the time the bell rang. Okay. And everybody where these integrity laws were maintained and put in place, those numbers were accurate. Even in states, by the way, like North Carolina, it was a little off, but it wasn't that badly off, But in other areas where in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, it was just way off. And here we go. So here are the finals, supposedly the finals. And understand, in a state like Pennsylvania, and I know from talking to officials there, I think we even spoke to one of the same guys because he had told me, I spoke to Robert about this. Let me explain to you how this works. Just because it goes out as a requested ballot does not mean it was really requested. It could have been automatically just sent out, these ballot requests. So in Pennsylvania, about 3.1 million. But by the time, after 2 weeks of getting people out, they only had 2.4 million. Not only, that's a number, but the point is that is all they were supposed to have. What they're trying to feed you is that somehow 16% of that total number, which took them 2 weeks to amass, magically reappeared after election. 16%? So you couldn't get any more than 2.4 leading right up until the final numbers when you had a report, which you had, but all of a sudden there was 700,000 more? Robert, that's just not feasible, Robert.
And then you add to that, almost all of these states in key counties had excluded observers from being able to observe that process at key times. They did it in Fulton County, did it in Philadelphia, did it in Pittsburgh, did it in Detroit, did it in Milwaukee. And again, by the way, these problems were not being reported even in cities with a history of interesting elections like Chicago, like Cleveland, like Toledo, like St. Louis, like Kansas City, like Dallas, like Houston, like San Antonio. These problems weren't showing up there. They were just showing up in Las Vegas, showing up in parts of Phoenix based on testimony today. A provisional ballot clerk got up and testified that she was instructed by her boss to take in a whole bunch of ballots, even though the people were not registered voters or citizens in the state of Arizona. So he just said, just take them. And this is by the way, I don't blame all those people may not be corrupt. They were being threatened throughout the whole spring and summer that you better accept every ballot. You better not do signature matches. You better give a notice and opportunity to cure your fraudulent potential ballot. I love that. Hey, if my fake signature didn't work the first time, try again with notice and cure. That's what that is. In Las Vegas, a reporter tried it. He had people forge his name. 9 different people forged his name, sent it in with other red flags. 8 of the 9 were said to be authentic signatures when they were all forgeries. So we know the system is a crock. And again, if they have nothing to hide, why have they been hiding? If they have nothing to lie about, why have they been lying? If there's nothing in the signature matches that's a problem, why won't they allow anybody to see them? If there's no problem in the ballots, almost all of which have been digitized and scanned in a lot of these jurisdictions, why won't they show them to the world like they promised when they wrote these 9-figure checks to these various companies? So if there's no problem, let's see it. Today, the governor in Georgia and the secretary of state in Georgia, both Republicans, elected by thanks entirely to Trump voters in 2018, to people who are only voting Republican because of Trump. Both of them went into court and argued that Dominion's code is so super secret nobody can take a look at their computers, which is a complete garbage, complete hogwash. This is a defense that would never work in any other context. But he's actually taking Dominion's side. And it's because the Secretary of State while I have not been a fan of some of the more extravagant allegations by Lynn Wood or Sidney Powell, they are right that there are problems with the connections between the governor, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, and Dominion. I can tell you that from the moment I was down there, I was told by high-ranking officials, don't talk about Dominion. There's a lot of ties between Dominion and high-ranking Republican officials. And so now I think making these extravagant allegations that don't have strong evidence is a mistake, because then it allows the media and the courts and the elected officials to discredit all the good evidence. Yeah. This is why we should be careful, exercise a disciplined filter. Don't become the Russiagate of the right. But that doesn't mean there's not problems with computers. Just look at everything Democrats have been alleging for 15 years, saying computers are a major problem involved in voting. There's a lawsuit in Georgia right now by Democratic groups saying Dominion is a major problem. It can be easily hacked. A federal court has already made those findings in Georgia. So I'm seeing these media types pretend that it's one thing. I don't agree with the allegations against Dominion if you can't prove them about vote shifting. That does not mean these machines are safe. That I see these media types saying, oh, they can't be hacked. Everybody and their brother knows you can hack those machines.
Yeah, check this out, Robert. Actually, we got, and I've been trying now for almost 2 weeks to get their entire report, because somebody had said, and one of the documents is public, but then there are reports from the analysts that ran it. And this is from when Dominion twice tried to certify in Texas. And Laura pointed out, and she makes a good point. At this time, everybody they were putting out crazy polls in Texas, and it was like, well, maybe they can get Texas. And then it was denied.
For those who followed the show, one of the reasons why I still made money on this election, despite myself in a certain sense, because they blocked me out of London and Dublin. Because I'd won there so often. So they were like, stay home, Bobby. But it was because the Texas margin of victory was so good. And then that bet, and the Florida margin of victory, and the Ohio margin of victory, and the Iowa margin of victory. That's not supposed to happen. And Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan magically move in a certain direction the other way. Arizona and Georgia, just enough. Like people are saying it's an even movement. I even see Sean Trendy kind of talking about this. And I'm like, no, not really. Arizona moved 5 points or 4 points. Georgia moved a little more than 5 points, 5.5 points. That's not even movement. No. And I have yet to hear a compelling explanation as to why that happened in either state, because nobody was really predicting it beforehand. I mean, there was just the bad polls still had Arizona and Georgia less Democratic than they had those other states.
That's right.
Though you do have Nate Cohn saying that any allegation of, he said that, get this, he said that mail-in balloting had no impact on this election. Can you believe that? He said that with a straight face. You would think he would be hiding. I was just hiding like Mitch McConnell is right now.
Why is he even contributing to this conversation until he comes out and says, "Oh my God, I was so wrong," even though I was the best funded pollster this election cycle, I was the worst. And we are gonna label him the worst pollster of this cycle, because he had more money than everybody, Robert.
In Wisconsin, it was plus double digits. Remember all those? Remember Michigan, the rural working class counties were going to swing against Trump. He did better in almost all of them.
Let's get it. Where is it? I know I still got
a crazy map of his.
Let's get it. I know it's here. There it is. Here we go.
Look at that. The map looked nothing like that. Almost nothing like that. I mean, look at all those Appalachian counties in southeast Pennsylvania and southwest Pennsylvania, southeast Ohio. He said we're going to flip. Those northern upper peninsula Michigan counties, he said we're going to flip. Northern and western Wisconsin, Norwegian country, he said was going to flip. Northern Minnesota, he said was going to flip. All those parts of Iowa, none of that happened. In fact, just the opposite happened. It's extraordinary how off he was.
That's Iowa. That's what happened. And again, from this new graphic we got today, the top left is the Pivot County in yellow. And then you can see the election result next to the Pivot County map from 2016. And then the big one is this year. That's what happened this year. So he wasn't only very wrong. I mean, there's others like Morning Consult who have bigger misses, but the Morning Consult poll didn't poll as many places as they polled. And it didn't have the money that they had.
And Morning Consult admits they're somewhat limited because they just do small online panels. That can, in those states, their individual state polling has never been very good. Sometimes their national polling is decent. It's sort of hit or miss, but their state polling, it was bad in 2016. They had all these states wrong, but I mean, the New York Times was one of the worst. 10, 11-point leads in all these Midwestern states. Clearly fake news to push a fake narrative that was intended. They would be the ones screaming fraud if Trump had pulled it out.
Well, that's what I can't help now. But I'm telling you, Laura's happy. The cynic in me has really grown because I can't help but to think, we were in the field the same time he was in the field in Wisconsin. We were in the field the same time that ABC and the Washington Post were in the field in Wisconsin. There is no way that I could have manipulated that data to come up with those results. No way.
Really?
Not even
there wasn't a 17-point lead in Wisconsin?
No, I'm telling you, Robert. And then in Ohio, where is did I have there's was here's
Quinnipiac end up with like a 10-point, some crazy number?
Yeah, Quinnipiac, I am accusing, and I'm telling you I'm right. I am accusing Quinnipiac of fraud and flat fraud because
CNN's polls were a joke.
Joke
this cycle.
Here's their final generic ballot, Robert. Democrat plus 12. Unbelievable. It was a 10-point miss, and their state level polls were just even worse, right? Because even here's a CNN in Wisconsin. Biden plus 8.
Plus 8.
Yeah.
Again, you, Susquehanna, and Trafalgar were the most right again. And what do you have in common? You, two of the three, well, and to a certain degree, Patrick Basham. He only publicized his polls on Cotto Gottfried in terms of individual state results. But you four, and 3 of the 4 are not allowed to appear on 538's polling averages.
That's exactly right. Even though we're the most accurate ones for years.
Yes,
and not only were we more accurate.
People should harass their state legislators, their congressmen, their senators, their local committee people.
Yep.
Start hiring pollsters that are not incompetent rubes. Yep. Part of the reason why Trump got into this trouble is he had bad internal polling. I can guarantee you the Georgia Republicans have atrocious internal polling. Both Senate candidates were, not the one was guaranteed to be a runoff,
6.
But Purdue was assured it was not going to be a runoff.
Yeah, plus 6,
and that's why totally taken by surprise, doesn't know how to handle it now, not handling it well. But advise them, they should be hiring people like Matt Brainerd for data work. They should be hiring people like you for campaign work. We need to purge all of these incompetent rubes from the political apparatus, from the political class that runs and controls and monopolizes campaigns, because they're helping kill campaigns and helping kill candidates and helping kill the party. I have no doubt that there's a reason why the initial reaction of so many elected state officials was to try to coerce Trump to concede.
That's it.
Because their first source of information is the permanent political class that gives terrible, terrible advice. They're the Frank Luntzes of the world, who himself admitted he should never get a job again if the polling is as bad as this polling cycle ended up. And yet he's still yipping somehow. Why can't these people go to Canada or something like they promised? But everybody should be telling, hire better people. I'm not going to give money to your campaign until you hire better people. I'm not going to give money to a political effort that says it's for legal work until it actually goes for legal work. Matt Brainerd shouldn't have to separately, independently fundraise for this. There should be a massive, I had like 50 handwriting experts reach out to me saying they're willing to help, but I can't ask all of them to work for free for a month.
That's right. You can't. Same thing with the fraud investigators. There's other people we could bring on, and we would be quicker, but you cannot do this. And people have been willing to contribute to support the work we've done. But it's expensive. And Robert, you know this from your own experience. We have to pull smaller lists to establish, the statistical likelihood of it being more systemic. There is no way. You look at how much Matt Brainerd has raised, and he's been very good with publishing how much he spent. And that, in truth, our vendors don't want people to know either. They don't. So when he says the vendors are asking me to keep quiet, there's no doubt they want no part of this. They are totally afraid. That they're scared crapless. But the money, and I don't mean to kick a guy when he's down, Robert, but how long did we hear about freaking New Mexico? Look at this result in New Mexico, right? How much time and effort and media spots on Martha McCallum did we hear and waste talking about the state of New Mexico? Even if his and Colorado too, to some extent, it was a freaking blowout.
Oh, waste of money. They were wasting some money in Oregon. Waste of money. All the money from the get-go, it was clear. Nevada ended up being in the game, but I was skeptical of Nevada because it was going to be easy to get the margin of fraud was bigger in Nevada. You had to win it turns out by 3 points probably to win legitimately. But clearly Arizona, it's clear their internal polling. Now, I think they, like I said, got some funny ballots out of Georgia, but putting that aside, their polling, it still probably legitimately was within a point. So without full mail-in balloting, maybe it would have been 1.5. But clearly their internal polling was bad. I have a reason to believe that their internal polling people were telling them that Georgia was safe for the last month.
Yeah.
That it was going to be 5 to 6 points, just like 2016. Clearly that was not accurate. They were not detecting what was going on. They were not polling well. They clearly didn't put much of an effort into certain places in the state. Because, like I said, parts of the state that should have been 3 to 4 points redder that would have held the state for him.
That's right. He would have held it either way, Robert. He lost
without
some
Atlanta.
of that.
Atlanta could have done everything it did. Suburbs done everything it did. Put targeted money in the exurbs and rural areas that were trending his way. Black voters were trending his way. Make sure you capitalize off both. He wins without question. He wins outside the margin of fraud. They let it get within the margin of fraud, one, by not safeguarding against these fraudulent tactics, but that were being easily utilized and employed, but also by lousy polling, lousy data work, lousy campaign management. And you're seeing all of it in the Senate campaign. They're about to blow the Senate and control of the Senate in Georgia unless they get a wake-up call and reverse course quickly.
And I do agree with that, because somebody asked me when you said it before whether I agree with it. Somebody asked in the chat. I do. It's going to, first of all, everything about this election is bad for Republicans. The timing of it. Republicans are not fans of runoffs right after the holidays. Many of them will still be on vacation. This is the worst possible scenario for the Republican Party. And then they're doing nothing to stand up to Stacey Abrams. They're basically running the same playbook. They'll actually get worse. I'm not even kidding when I tell you that the Republicans in Georgia are trying to catch on to people who took Stacey. It apparently is not a few people here and there. Move to Georgia, sign up through motor. Letting motor voter happen in your state is bad. When we conducted that study on illegal residents who vote, the number one reason that they cited how they got on the voter roll was motor voter. And some of them didn't even know that they were put on the voter rolls. And we legitimately believe them. They were shocked, just as shocked as we were, to find out that they were in fact registered to vote. And some of them actually got nervous. Like, look, I'm up for a green card. I'm trying to get a green, I don't want to be caught doing something like this. But I went and got a state ID. I went down to DMV, whatever. And they must have registered me then. And then the second one was campaign outreach. So first was motor voter, and the second was campaign outreach, which means there were legitimately people, activists, who knew they were illegal and should not be eligible to vote, yet they did it anyway. And nobody checked. It's crazy.
No doubt. And that's why, like, most of the forms of voter fraud, you can't even find ways to prove outside of an inside whistleblower. So, like, if votes were bought, if votes were coerced, if votes were blackmailed, well, Georgia makes it a crime for you to report that. Because you swear on the outside of the envelope that none of that happened. So they force you to be a witness against yourself in a crime for you to blow the whistle in Georgia. So the net effect is all of those. The reason why we have a secret ballot, folks, is all gone with an absentee ballot.
That's it.
That's not in a secret ballot in a safe place. Someone else can fill out your ballot. Someone else can coerce your ballot. And they love that scenario where they can buy your ballot because they can watch you fill out the ballot, or they fill it out for you and you just sign it. In all those cases, the signature check won't flag the problem. The signature check just flags the most egregious problems. And the fact they're scared of that, well, they're saying, don't worry, it was checked twice. It was checked 3 times, checked by people who are trained by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Then why be so scared to allow any signature checks to happen that are independently confirmed? Clearly something's wrong in this election. And if there's nothing wrong on the ballots, if there aren't a bunch of perfectly weird ballots that just magically mark in Biden's name like a computer did it and there's no one else on it, if there's or there's weird serial numbering, the kind of thing that can happen, for example, if ballots weren't spoiled that were tested prior to the election and they got thrown into the election count later, and part of those added ballots they found 3 days later, then why not share the digitized ballots? All the ballots are scanned, folks. They can upload them to the web tomorrow. They promised, Georgia Secretary of State said he would do that when he did the deal in 2019 to give Dominion $106 million. He said, here's the great thing about this. Now our elections will be so transparent. And you can go find it. It's right on his own website. We will print all the ballots and publish the ballots to the world if there's ever any controversy concerning the ballots. Hasn't published a single ballot.
Here we are. And look, people asked about this before too. That's why I went to New York. Look, California is the leader here because they are the most left-wing and large blue state. But now we have New York easily following down California's path of being a third world country. This is ridiculous. Tenney could literally have this election taken from her. And then we have Zeldin. Get this. This is crazy. I don't care what anybody tries to say, what excuse they drum up. The fact that New York won is still claiming to have anywhere. Are you ready? This is what they claim to have reported. 73.74% to 86.5%. Well, that's a major difference, Robert, when Lee Zeldin has over a 61% of the current reported vote. That's a major difference. Is there 15% left or is there 27% left? Do you see what they're allowed to get away with here? We have never been this way before. You would never come to People's Pundit Daily or any other election projection website. Go to Fox, go to New York Times. It was always 80%, 82, 83, 84, 86, 90. Never did you see a range like this. And you see this because the truth is it's a complete chaotic third world situation. Nobody is following any kind of standards. And again, look at
Tenney. Needs to be uniform. In Brazil, they just pulled it off within 2 hours.
It's unbelievable.
This makes us look like a joke to the world. The not only these absurd rulings, but the mere fact that New York, our two most sophisticated states, according to the people from those states, New York and California, still can't count their ballots 3 weeks after Election Day. It's crazy. Ridiculous. And it looks highly suspicious and highly suspect because it is.
That's it.
It's that simple. This is how all ballot elections have been stolen since the 40s. Just look up Box 13 and LBJ's race for the Senate, 1946. Right. They wait until the last minute to report ballots, and magically just enough ballots come in for the key candidate who has control over that county. Same thing happened with Daley in 1960 in Chicago for John F. Kennedy. So the idea that this is somehow news or new or could never be interpreted in a nefarious way is just lies and gaslighting by the media and the Democratic types. And if Josh Hawley is serious about national ambitions, he should be talking about election reform. He should be talking about objecting to the presidential election electors unless certain steps are taken in those states. Ted Cruz should be doing the same. Rand Paul should be doing the same. Anybody who's got any presidential ambition should be stepping to the plate now when it's needed, not only needed for Trump, but needed for simply integrity and confidence in our elections, period. And they don't even have to promise to contest. They just have to say, I will contest if these basic certification steps are not taken, if these basic audit steps are not taken, if these basic checks for transparency in our process are not implemented and enforced. That's all they have to do. And the fact that they're scared to do so tells you how utterly inept the Republican Senate is. And it's Mitch McConnell's fault in large part because the turtle's busy hiding inside his shell, while many of his Trump appointees that he recommended to Trump from the Federalist Society are gutting Trump's cases in the federal courts. And Christopher Wray, his recommendation for the head of the FBI is doing nothing of consequence about all of this. Just now asking Matt Brainerd for information they should have had months ago.
What are they doing?
Sit on and bury.
That's right. What were they doing this entire time, Robert? Because they have the resources to investigate things that we can. What have they been doing this entire time?
But they have far more resources. They could grand jury subpoena people's phone records, email records, and bank records tomorrow. We don't have access to that.
Yep. And it's no doubt. And by the way, I was trying to look for it. I can't find it, but there was just this thing from the BBC I tweeted a couple of weeks ago, probably got removed and why I can't see it. But bottom line, this is when the State Department, the rest of the UN, and everybody was trying to force, I don't want to butcher the name of the African country, but trying to force them into a new election because of different reasons. And the BBC runs a report saying, how does the US, how do you spot election fraud? And every single damn tick down the list, Robert, is everything we're talking about. It. Then now people are trying to pretend as if it's some novel concept that if you stop counting ballots at key moments and then, dead of the night, try to do it again, you keep out overseers, you don't let them meaningfully participate in the process, and down the line, all the things we're talking about now. Don't allow people to verify. Canada put out that tweet about a day after I shared that article. And they have their moment in the sun because we look ridiculous. They're always treated as a second-class kind of Western nation, right? Compared to us, but we always look down on them. And look at them now. And look at us now. I mean, we completely lost
they did
all
Brexit
of our
by
moral
paper
authority.
ballots. And not only did they do Brexit by paper ballots, all the ballot counting was filmed. They're not only observers, they were filming right with each ballot. Everybody could see it throughout the entire country. Why in the world can't we do that? There's no good reason why we can't do that. It was social distancing the reason why we couldn't have a camera over people's shoulders? What's the excuses there, Democrats and media? So there's just no excuse for this complete. The United States Election Assistance Commission said the hallmark of any honest election process is complete, full transparency, where videotaping should be encouraged and occur. That's our own independent, nonpartisan United States Election Assistance Commission, the barometer for ethical election standards in the country. And they were the ones that said you have to have meaningful monitoring of every stage. They removed monitoring from the signature match standards pretty much everywhere. They removed monitoring from ballot counting at critical time periods. Ballots did drop at unusual time periods. Ballots did get counted in Democratic counties after they were counted almost completely in Republican counties. There were gaps in ballot counting that occurred that should not have. There were. They said that there were a certain number of ballots. Those ballots magically increased over the next night, over the next morning, over the next day, over the next day. Independent observers all were saying there weren't enough ballots for Biden to win in Wisconsin or in Pennsylvania on the night of. And that was from Democratic reporters, Democratic analysts, Democratic projectors. There's a reason why Trump went up to 85% in the overnight betting markets in the United Kingdom, where billions and billions of dollars are being gambled. It was because everybody agreed there weren't enough ballots for Biden to win, and then magically just enough popped up. And now we have proof that people that were labeled as indefinitely confined, were they not, in the hundreds of thousands, voted in Wisconsin. People in Pennsylvania voted where their ballots were never marked against signatures, where they were given a chance of notice and cure that was illicit, where they don't match up with various residential addresses. We have the same problem in Michigan. We have the same problem in Georgia. We have the same problem in Arizona. They just certified, the Republican governor just certified an election where they still haven't explained how somebody from Tennessee voted in Arizona when he said he never voted in Arizona. We had in Nevada, magically they were showing up at casinos. They were registered to vote at a record number at casinos this year. I mean, this is obvious problems. Their signature checks failed to catch forgery 8 of the 9 times. So the next time you hear some nonsense evidence about there's no statistical anomalies, there was nothing irregular here, there was nothing unusual that occurred, there's no possibility of fraud, there is more documentary, testifying, statistical, expert evidence of irregularities and fraud in this election. And you don't have to prove fraud. You just have to prove more illegal votes than the margin of victory. That, in the definition of illegal votes in the state of California, is votes not legally cast. It doesn't require any fraud at all. It just requires votes that were not qualified to vote because of either the method or the person who voted. But we have more proof of illegal voting in this election than ever in the history of presidential elections. Period.
Listen, I found it. Let's just go through this real quick because I know it's getting late. But you ready? Vote rigging. How to spot the telltale signs. And if I butcher this country's name, I'm sorry, but it was Gabon or Gabon or however you say it. And too many voters. And they talk about turnout rates first. If you're approaching turnout rates that are mandatory voting nation turnout rates and you don't have mandatory voting, you have a problem. And then also, it's not the 100% mark that everybody focuses on. It's below that because change of address, deceased, all of these people are always greater number than the voter file even suggests they are. All right.
And that's according to folks, that's according to the United States Census. They confirmed their 2018,
That's right.
2016, 2014, all the way back to every study they've ever done. They have found more registered voters actually exist and are alive. I'm sorry, there are more people on the voter rolls than are actually registered voters and alive, according to the census. And often that number is as high as 20 million to 40 million people. The gap in 2016, I believe, was 40 million between the number of people listed on the databases of voter registration rolls and the number of people the census said were both alive and legally registered to vote. So that's not, that's the reason why they're saying knowing that your registered voter rolls are much bigger than the actual number of legitimate registered voters means that, the highest rate you've almost ever seen is 90% of the actual registered voter number. And by the way, we're approaching over I think the census had 163 million in 2016 legitimately registered voters. And so given population growth, that was probably 170 million or so this cycle. And we're getting close to what, 92, 93%?
This is what it says right here, Robert, flatly. It says it's a dead giveaway when you hit that mark. All right, which is what, if you remember, if you guys were watching the show before the election, we were saying the whole idea Nate Cohn was pushing was ridiculous because there really should not be that many voters. And if there is, then something went horribly wrong. That is what Robert and I said for weeks. And here is what this is. They all want to change, like Robert just said. This is like novel now, right? But it isn't. They're just blatantly changing the definitions of things and blatantly changing what is and what isn't a telltale sign, to use their own words. The main reason that a full turnout is practically impossible is that the electoral registrars, even if they are recently compiled, can rarely be 100% up to date. And the bottom line is, in Gabon or Gabon, however you say, that was compulsory. They did compel you to vote, but it wasn't enforced, Robert. So even them reaching that 90% at that time was suspect because it wasn't enforced. And the whole damn world was saying it was suspect, right? And then basically in specific areas, sound familiar, guys? An election, I once reported on an election in the Niger Delta where some areas had a turnout of more than 120%. But a turnout of more than 100 in an area or an individual polling station is a major red flag and a reason to cancel the result and rerun the election. How standards change, right? And then even in specific areas, while they're basically saying, why would one particular area or one individual polling station, and Robert and I were alluding to this before, have a 90% turnout while most other areas register less than 70, especially when they have similar demographic makeups and geographic makeups. All right, so these are what we were talking about in the first part of the show. Large numbers of invalid voters, which they actually say can be the reverse too, Robert. Large numbers of not invalidated voters. Like it's the total. It could be both. So you're either trying to cancel a group altogether, or you're trying to make every single vote count, which clearly that should never be the case. More votes than paper ballots issued is another one. Results that don't match, which definitely go to what Robert and I were saying before. All right. And then even the Dominion folks would love this stuff, let me tell you. But I'm not going to read that out loud and go down that rabbit hole. But they would love this, all right? And then big one right here, delay in announcing the results, all right? Election commissions, particularly in Africa, can appear to take an inordinately long time to publish official results. This is not helped by local observer networks and political parties who, tallying up the results sent in by their agents on mobile phones, have a good idea of the result long before the more cumbersome official process is completed. But then again, there is a point where you freeze, and that freezing is not legit, especially when, like we were trying to tell you before, Philadelphia already said how many ballots they had, and then they freeze and they come back with different numbers than they had before. That is not kosher dill. It is not kosher. All right. And this is not something that is crazy. It's just, it's not. And I tweeted out that link. You guys should read that when you get a chance.
Oh, absolutely. And this is what international standards are set up to remedy. and we're abandoning them. And our courts are saying that the law no longer means what it says on paper. When they're not busy saying that you don't have standing to sue, that even if fraud occurred, there's nothing you can do about it, that if you do sue, we're going to say you sued too late, even though you sued as soon as you were injured, or we'll say it's somehow magically moot because, hey, the person you were trying to protect is already dead, so good luck with that. It's that kind of theories of law that make the courts look like the embarrassment. All these elite law Twitter types are like, oh, Trump is 0 for 35, 1 for 35. The message Trump supporters get is, oh, you're telling me just how corrupt our courts are.
That's all.
Because even the risk of human error means you should win a few more than 1 out of 35. You're telling me that our courts are instituted. Law Twitter doesn't understand. They're educating the world about how corrupt the systems and institutions they're a part of are. They're not changing anyone's mind. They're making the system look worse, not better, in how it's handled this disaster of an election.
Are they not the ones who did this in the first place? The legislators did not do this. Nobody passed laws. No state legislature took to the floor of their lower or upper chamber and changed any of these laws that have been on the books for years. This is what Democrats wanted to do for many, many years, but could not get it done at the ballot box because nobody would ever support this. Nobody. No. And if you ran on this, you'd get killed.
And to Douglas Byrd's question, no doubt. I mean, the Republican governor reversed himself within 3 or 4 days. And what he did, Trump supporters will never forget or forgive. So his plan better not be for running for president. His plan, I think he's term limited out. So his plan is probably to cash in. He'll probably get a nice little gig at some corporate law firm or marketing firm or lobbying firm that will say, hey, thanks for coming through for us at that key juncture. Here's your cash. I mean, this is the same dope that has gone along with a lot of lockdowns. So it's not a surprise that he's been an utter abominable failure. But the biggest problem is institutional Republicans not realizing that the Romney-McCain W era is over. This is it's either Trump or die for the Republican Party.
That's exactly right. And I will, somebody asked me to circle back. I will read this. I don't want to go down again the rabbit hole of Dominion, but I will say there are some things, even like Robert said, that are legitimate. It's just that you have certain time constraints. What I was referring to is that we got some excerpts from the experts' testimony to the Secretary of State in Texas. This is after their second failure to certify. And I've reached out, and I will continue to try to get the entire report, because there are 3 pieces of evidence that were used to make this decision. The first, of course, was Dominion themselves and the people from Democracy Suite making their presentation. There were the examinations of the equipment itself. And then there were 4 experts. There were 2 electronic data communications systems specialists, and then 2 experts in election law and procedure. I'm not going to blow up their names because I would like them to give me some on the record information, or maybe I don't know if they're not able to release this, Robert, but it should be the case that Jose Esparza comes forward and explains why he put his signature to the document that we're looking at right now. I am. Because it says pretty clear here that not only what he read in these witnesses, these experts the state brought in, not only what he read in their reports made him doubt whether Democracy Suite 5.5-A itself, not just Dominion, but whether it was suitable for its intended purposes, let alone whether it operated efficiently and accurately. And that they literally casted doubt on whether this was not only not built to prevent it, but prevent fraud or unauthorized manipulation of some kind, but that it seemed like it was almost built for it. Like that's what it's, and not that they're saying that that it happened. It's just not safe. And like, I don't know if I still have the clip, but Jerry Nadler used to believe that once upon a time.
Oh, yes. Yeah, most of these concerns came from Democrats. Dominion was put into control entirely by this is the problem I have when people go down the Soros route and other stuff. Dominion's, a lot of their key allies are on the Republican side. It's Republicans. Democrats voted against Dominion in Georgia.
That's
Democrats
right.
filed suit to stop Dominion from being used in Georgia. It was the Republican Secretary of State, Republican Lieutenant Governor, Republican Governor, former Republican Secretary of State, and the Republican
Yeah, they did it.
legislature that pushed Dominion through. So historically, it's been the left critical of these, and I'm thrilled that the right has joined in the idea that we should return to paper ballots. Now, I'm okay with scanning the ballots as an extra check, and I'm for some form of blockchain as also an extra check. But it should be an extra check. We should just hand mark the ballots the old-fashioned way. We can do it in a way that's easily done to where it's very manageable now. We don't use these punch ballots or any of that other nonsense like 2000 that led to large numbers of people getting their ballots thrown out. Used to be 2% on average. It was a terrible system we had, but it was only because of how embarrassing that was they ever fixed it. And I believe so I'm all for getting rid of computers as a necessary intermediary and used solely as a secondary backup system in elections, and the rest. And there are legitimate criticisms of Dominion, including they've never been the top of the line in security from an internet cyber standard. Just random nerds on the internet will buy one of these machines and hack it in 7 minutes. So, I mean, that's no major surprise. Now, mostly the machines are not supposed to be connected to the internet. That was one of the problems in Detroit. It appeared some of them were. They're not supposed to be connected to the internet. And I think the big, broad allegations send people down a rabbit hole to where rather than investigating whether there's people illegally registered, rather than investigating anomalies in statistical turnout between comparable precincts, you have 2/3 of the crowdsourcing out there chasing Dominion stories from 2006.
Incredible.
So no Dominion and Smartmatic are not meaningfully related. I understand that. I researched that because I went down one of these rabbit holes, and it was clear that they were misstating different facts and combining different stories. Smartmatic was designed by Venezuelan refugees, not designed for the purposes of Hugo Chavez, and was actually used against the Chavez regime in one of its elections. In the Maduro regime, they argued irregularities based on their data. So now I'm again not a fan of any of these technology companies, not a fan of their controlling things. I do think what the certification test in Texas is pertinent because what nobody's saying is that including our own government, we wanted these machines to be hackable so we could steal someone else's election overseas. They don't want to, they're obviously Sidney Powell is saying this overtly, but it's one of those things like, where do you expect that to go? Do you expect the federal judge to say, yeah, I'm willing to take on the entire system now? You're making a rhetorical point. You're not going to make a successful legal one. And that's where I thought, let's focus when we have so many productive remedies of provable evidence. Like this was Matt Brainerd's point. He was like, I can't prove those things. Those things can be often disproven overnight by someone with more expertise than me. We don't need that proof. We have all the proof right here that changes the election. Don't distract from that. Don't detract from that by chasing rabbit holes and fairy tales.
And to your point, Robert, nothing in any of these. I got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of documents. I want their entire report is what I want. I don't want snippets, and because I can tell, I know it's legit, but I want the whole thing. But not a single page makes a reference to Smartmatic. They are talking about Dominion and democracy. It says report a review of Dominion voting systems Democracy Suite 5.5-A, which was an update to the 5.5. And the -A was their attempt to come back to Texas and say, all right, we fixed some of the stuff you had concerns about. And the experts were like, no, you didn't. This is not a legitimate voting system. What they basically say is, look, some states, maybe this would work for them. But in Texas, we do care about fraud. And we have laws on the books. You don't meet the standard. You don't meet our standard. That is what it's not viable in this state because there is apparently I can get the laws they're citing right here, but sections 122.035 A and B of the Texas Election Code, and they basically don't meet those. Whatever it says. Oh, and there's more. So apparently there's a ton. I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, if you would go and look it up, it has to do with integrity.
And it would be good for election reform to get rid of these election systems as necessary intermediaries. Only use them as backups if to use them at all.
I agree.
But The Georgia hand recount did not show any problem with Dominion systems. So unless you believe that the election officials are in on it, and then that's a different conspiracy, frankly, the allegations being made have not been borne out when they've been saying there's been shifts everywhere of 6% of the vote in every county in every state. That's just so it was the reason why we're discouraging that path, aside from it being difficult to prove, is it could in some cases be easily disproven. And then all of a sudden the courts and everybody else ignores all your good evidence.
Right.
Best way to ruin a good case is to highlight the bad evidence in your case. So that's why we've been discouraging that path and encouraging a more productive path. And hopefully that will happen. Though I'm thrilled to see people questioning the too dominant role of technology in our elections. It clearly doesn't speed things up. Look at New York and California.
I mean, Robert, if we're going to go this right, exactly. If we're going to go this route, though, we're going to go the route of technology. Why did we go this way? There's so many. Why didn't we just go full bore? Like, somebody is a veteran. You got to sign into my veteran affairs thing. And they have a DOD verifications that's separate that I still have access to. I mean, it's pretty damn secure. It really is pretty damn secure. I don't understand why we're going. If we're going to go the way of tech, why wouldn't we go the way of something that has identity theft protection in it, and then we can eliminate these corrupt poll workers altogether? You know what I'm saying? We would be able to do that in the future.
Why especially if you incorporate things like blockchain that are almost unbreakable.
That's exactly right.
Unhackable without somebody noticing it. So there's definitely ways we could. My view was use a pure paper ballot system, but parallel protect it with modern hyper secure technology, so that it's a double layer of protection. And that way, so you fill out the ballot, it gets scanned, it connected by some means to blockchain so that you connect that your ballot did in fact count. You can track and trace the custody of your own ballot. We have independent confirmation of chain of custody of ballots, which apparently is now missing in Delaware County and Pennsylvania, which had some of these unusual turnout patterns. The same in some of the counties apparently now in Georgia. So the Trump campaign had to ask for the 5th time, and I was part of those prior 4 requests, for the 5th time to get a signature match check in Georgia. They still won't allow it.
It's crazy. This is not, and again, this is low hanging fruit. Like you said before, stay focused on the more productive venues. This is low hanging fruit. You cannot, you cannot, I keep saying it over and over again. I don't know why it's not taking with some people. You cannot treat different groups of voters different ways. That's like, I just don't get it.
Until you become Trump puts you on the federal bench, another one of these Federalist Society members, God bless, and you suddenly can't read Bush v. Gore, like the Third Circuit judge said, oh, there's no problem with discriminating between counties. That was exactly what Bush v. Gore said. Not only that, that's what Reynolds v. Sims said. That's the reason why rural counties can't get to have more votes count. In Tennessee, we had a system that favored rural communities because we wanted to continue. Well, there are a lot of reasons for it, but frankly, it was in part to say there's something valuable about geographic representation that is independently important. And there's a lot of constitutional arguments that was actually originally intended. There is no one person, one vote principle in the Constitution. That was invented by the Supreme Court because they wanted to break up old rural Democratic political and Republican political machines, but mostly just rural political machines of both parties. But there they said there was standing. They said 2 counties can't treat voters differently. They're one person, one vote. And that's what they said again in Bush v. Gore. And now you have the Third Circuit saying, oh, no, that was never the standard. We don't know where you're talking about.
You think it's
just
harder
lying about intellectual dishonesty. The courts the core problem for Trump is still the same one, that the Republican establishment in the judiciary and the legal profession and the elected officials and in the Republican establishment don't want Trump to win and will do everything to undermine him. That's still his biggest hurdle, is that he doesn't have enough populist allies in elected officials in the legal world. Even the people he himself appointed are the ones betraying him.
Do you think it's harder, though, for the Supreme Court itself to ignore Bush v. Gore? So, Dershowitz seems to think Trump's going to win.
Will not ratify this, but the question is whether they ignore it. That's where the Supremes will go. Amy Barrett might this is so confusing, like she did right before the election. Remember she was going to get on the bench and she was going to save us and she was going to be able, and we were the only ones saying there's problems and risk with her. And what does she do as soon as she gets up there? Oh, this is so confusing. I can't decide this in 24 hours, even though I'm the smartest judge in history, according to so many of the conservatives telling me. I just can't figure it out. That's why we're in this mess. Because there are already 4 votes to overturn Pennsylvania. Yeah. She just decided not to be the 5th. Now, that doesn't mean she can't still step up to the plate and save the day and prove me wonderfully wrong. I would be greatly thrilled if she did, but watch her do it again. So we'll find out. But the Supreme Court will never ratify this because they couldn't with a straight face. Roberts could write a bogus opinion, but the other 4 can't join him.
Yeah, they would. But Roberts, even some of the things, he hates Trump. I mean, there's just no doubt. But he really is concerned badly about the
Thomas will have no problem overturning the election. Alito's already picked at what Pennsylvania did. Yep. Gorsuch is already agitated about how crazy these rules are. Kavanaugh is a little bit of a weak link, but he has said that but he is a big believer in legislative control over presidential electors, which a lot of these cases go right to. The big question is Barrett. Does Barrett step up to the plate or not? If Barrett steps up to the plate, they could say, look, we have a constitutional process for a contested election. It's the state delegations in the House. And that's what we have because a whole bunch of states decided to do an election in an illegal manner to have a lot of illegal votes count. They knew they were doing that and they went forward with it anyway.
They did it on purpose.
It's their fault for not having an election that couldn't be contested and couldn't be in doubt. This election we can't validate it. These procedures are improper. We're not going to have our elections be lower than a third world standard, which is where they are right now, lower than the third world, below Brazil. That's not a standard you should have, folks. Now, it's like being below Mississippi in educational rankings. It's not a place to be. No offense to all my friends from Mississippi. Next time I'll pick on Alabama since I'm from Tennessee. But that's the way it should be. And they can step in. My guess is they do one of 2 things. They either refuse to take it before the election, but then take it after the election to clean it up so it doesn't happen again, or they do get involved prior to the election. I think that the likelihood they go pure Pontius Pilate and let Pennsylvania Supreme Court, rub it in their eye like the Florida Supreme Court did when they rubbed it in their eye. Yeah. I think that is going to make it very hard for them not to rule ultimately, which will be good for our future elections. It just may not salvage or save Trump here. But again, Trump doesn't even need SCOTUS. All he needs is either state legislatures to send their own set of electors, and then Congress has to deal with it one way or the other, or Congress to independently intervene and say, we challenge these electors based on fraud and throw it out and go to state delegations. Either one of those events can happen. Now, the congressional event is if Pelosi might be able to block a House vote on the state delegations, but make her do that. Make it go that route. Yeah, I agree. No risk. And so at least we can have political remedy down the road. And the Trump Republican base is not so divided that we have complete Democrat carte blanche control, because contrary to what Lynn Wood and other people are saying, it is a very bad idea and I've never been a vote for the lesser of 2 evils guy. I didn't vote between 1996 and 2016. I didn't vote, for a long time. So I'm not exactly that person. Democratic carte blanche control is a major risk to the country, period, because they're talking about changing the rules of the game. Yeah, having 11 million illegal aliens become citizens overnight. Yeah. Changing who votes could change Texas overnight. Could guarantee permanently change Arizona and Nevada overnight.
Their election reform bill, Robert? Oh my God.
Election reform would be gone if that Democratic control takes place. And what they're talking about is stacking. They would stack the Senate with Puerto Rico and D.C. so that now they would be able to control the Senate permanently. They would try to even rig the House more if they could. And they would definitely stack the Supreme Court so that even that wouldn't be a check. So this is, everything really is on the line in Georgia. And we unfortunately can't rely on the incompetent rubes running that state, running those elections. Because they're doing everything possible to lose it. And I was in the room when they were warned 3 weeks ago exactly this would happen. They said, make the recount the issue for the runoff and you win. Yeah. Run from the recount and you lose.
You'll get crushed.
And they're like, no, we've been doing this forever. We can,
Sounds like 2 months ago.
Yes.
Sounds like 2 months ago. I hate to tell everybody because there were people in the chat like, are you kidding me? No, we're not kidding you.
Nope,
This is where it's at. This is the reality. We don't BS you. We would not BS you. This sounds very similar. It's just right down this, right off the same damn cliff. By the way, agenda items you cited before, all of which we polled in various battleground states, all of which overwhelmingly opposed by the American people. By 2-to-1 margins, they do not want to pack the court. By 2-to-1 margins, they do not want to give DC a Senate representation. Yet, here we are.
And that's because the media record level suppression. The only comparable election is probably 1896. Where there was massive, here we had big tech, big money, big media, suppression, censorship, and manipulation of the electorate. Most of the electorate did, like as public opinion polling confirmed. There were if the Biden voters had known of Biden's corruption, had known of Biden's plans on these issues, and so many of them wouldn't have voted for him that he would have lost everywhere. That was anywhere within 4 points. And so he would have lost Michigan, lost Wisconsin, lost Pennsylvania, lost Georgia, lost Arizona, lost Nevada, maybe even lost Minnesota, because there was that many people and that high a percentage of a vote that had a problem with this. So but the media did a record job of it. Oh, what is the status of the crowdfunding of the poll?
That's where I was going to try to segment into that. As a matter of fact, before we go, I mean, we're pretty much, look, people should and can support it because we're not totally there yet, but I'm going to start because we're running out of time and we need to get out there. So, people can go to paypal.me/People's Pundit, and people can go to venmo.com/People's Pundit, and they can contribute to it. We are going to ask, it probably going to be a pretty big one because I want to ask about different things. And that's what I was going to kind of segue into to ask you before we go here, because I'm going to build it tomorrow on Inside the Numbers. I'd like to show people, here's the question. What are your suggestions? So far, we're going to ask about voter ID. We're going to ask about checking signatures. We're going to ask about whether or not both parties should be present and meaningfully able to engage in the process. We got several things down the line, but if there's anything you want to add to it, absolutely.
And I think this is critically important for the public narrative, critically important. Richard's polling results out of this will be cited in election contests. And courts, by the way, even including Michigan Supreme Court justices have already been citing what public opinion data is out there, saying, look, there's a large number, record-setting number of Americans. This is the kind of thing that gets courts' attention. When the courts think that they can just screw you and there's no consequence, that's exactly what they will do.
And we cannot let Reuters dominate this. We cannot let Morning Consult or even Harvard. I like Mark, but Mark, you got the election wrong again, buddy. I mean, just about everywhere. You overestimated
An honest question
Democrats.
would have been, do you think a signature match should occur? Do you think monitoring should include the ability to see what the person's actually doing? Do you think that a manual recount and paper should be used? Do you think we should have paper ballots instead of computers deciding our elections? You ask those sequence of questions that go to core of election reform and the core of these issues, you're going to find massive numbers of support, including most independents, and large number of Democrats will agree. And it will be good to show not only the court of public opinion, but the courts of law and the elected officials that, hey, this is what people actually think. And you need to start taking action. And people have wondered, how can I contribute? How can I help? You can help by funding Richard's poll. You don't have to make big donations. Every little donation helps. The Free America Law Center is going to help cover some cost of these election contests. But you may not be in a position to have any resources. Give just your, share the link, share these stories, share this information, but also reach out. It doesn't cost anything to send an email. It doesn't cost a lot either. It's pennies to make a few phone calls, to reach out to anyone you know. It can be a state house member, it can be your local state senator. You'll be surprised how shocked these people are when they start getting massive organic results. Because that's why you suddenly saw Pennsylvania legislators be willing to hold a hearing. That's why you saw Arizona legislators suddenly willing to hold a hearing. That's why you saw a Pennsylvania court rule in Trump's favor and say the election was unconstitutional. Yeah, the Supreme Court rushed in to get rid of it the next day because there are Democratic hacks on that court, and the Republicans are all wusses and cowards. But at least you still had a judge say something that's important for his legacy purposes and for evidentiary purposes. So the next time the media says no, you say yes, a court said this election was illegal and unconstitutional in the Court of Common Pleas in Pennsylvania, and the Supreme Court didn't say otherwise. They just said, "Oh, it's too late." Ha ha ha. That was all they said. They used laches, which, as Viva Fry pointed out, means lazy and cowardice, which is exactly what the courts are being, lazy and cowardice, lazy cowards. But so you can make a meaningful difference, and you'd be surprised how much you can. On the locals page, vivabarneslaw.locals.com, we're crowdsourcing evidence, crowdsourcing information. I'm crowdsourcing exemplars of contests that you can file, so you can use them however you want. Not giving formal legal advice. You're free to do with it whatever you want. By golly, if you have the sudden inspiration to file it in your local court, God bless you, and keep going. We have a lot of people have remedies. In Michigan, you have a constitutional right to audit the vote. Bring more challenges, force the system to keep denying person after person after person remedy, put the system on trial, and see how long the system is not used to a real ordinary people rebellion. And they often help build the revolution, what helped build the Bill of Rights was a bunch of farmers got together and decided they were just going to shut down the courthouse for a day. Now, I'm not saying do that. I'm saying do the democratic version of that, which is use your legal remedies to force the system to respond and react. And if they're going to be corrupt, make them put it on the record that they were corrupt. At least give yourself your chance to establish your voice on the record. So there's lots of ways to make a difference without, you can contribute where you can contribute, do that. Share the link where you can do that. Contact your state legislator where you can do that. Say, I want you to go in there and contest this process because I think what happened here was wrong. And I'm not demanding you throw out the votes. I'm not demanding you throw out the election. I'm not demanding even you certify it for Trump. I'm just demanding you make it so that there's no certification for Biden until we've had an honest, transparent audit of this election.
That's great. I mean, I really can't add much to that. I added the Falc link to Free America Law Center link to YouTube. I also put it out in the comment section, guys. So you got it. I call it Falc. That's when I say Falc, that's what it's short. It's on the website too, so you'll see. But it's Free America Law Center, and it's on there on YouTube now. And like Robert said, contribute where you can, share where you can, do what you can, but get involved, because with the polling side of this, Robert, we just simply Reuters again. We went over on Inside the Numbers last week how wrong they were in every state again. How wrong they close in Arizona. That was about it. We cannot let these serial fabricators of bad polls be the only voices in this, because it does matter. Roberts did care about what the country said when it came to healthcare, and it does matter. There has to be somebody who gets it right.
Exactly. Like, ask them if they believe, if they are completely confident beyond any doubt that this election was a free, fair election where no illegal votes were cast. You're going to find that number ain't over 50%. Yeah.
There's also, like Robert was saying, some of these issues we've polled in the past. Voter ID in North Carolina had like 40% Democratic support. It was like 8 in 10 voters. It was ridiculous. And yet they got it passed, and they used their power in the courts, and they used their power in local officials to basically just circumvent the will of the people and trash it. So It's like, at this point, Democrats are always doing whatever they can to win. They don't care what it's going to cost them. They don't look at it like that.
If you ask people which is safer and which is a more of a secret ballot, being able to vote in secret in person, or a mail-in ballot that has none of those protections, depending on, there's a lot of different phraseology. You're going to find that people agree that it's a lot safer and a lot more secret ballot to do it in person than to do it by absentee.
And it is true that Hillary never went to court herself, by the way, but she joined the Jill Stein lawsuit. So,
it was her people funding it.
Absolutely.
It all came from Democratic funders.
They only stopped when it started to turn up more votes for Trump, because it was they wanted an audit. Now, it was all right for them to get an audit.
And remember the call by almost all the media and major legal scholars on the left for the electors to exercise their independence, to be faithless electors. Remember all of that? So there was calls then for the problem they had was they had almost no Democrats in control of state legislatures in the key swing states in 2016. That's why they didn't call for that remedy. I guarantee you they would have if they could have.
Oh, whoa. Had they had control of those states, Robert, they would have done everything possible to stop this man from taking control at the White House.
They would have even called for Joe Biden not to certify the election in his role as vice president, because Pence could do that, if they could rely on Biden to remember what he was supposed to do.
How many this guy got hurt already? How many times would we? I mean, really, at this rate,
he's the senile old guy who belongs in the old folks' home. You know, everybody knows this, and he's our president. This is a disgrace.
80 million votes. 80 million votes for a man who can't play with
a dog. Go back
to
the predictions that we had beforehand. Nailed Trump, 74 million. It's going to be almost exactly on the penny.
Yep.
It's the extra 5 million votes for Biden that are a surprise. And if they came from a consistent place, I'd be okay. I just missed it. They didn't come from a consistent place. It is wildly scattershot where he got these votes, and it magically shows up in places that had the least safeguards.
Even Newsweek, who published the Electoral College model, they had covered it before the election. This popular vote margin, Donald Trump still had an 80% chance to win the Electoral College. Why? Because that model doesn't account for these disparities in voter turnout in different areas. They just don't. They assume history will repeat itself.
4% increase in turnout in the county of where Cleveland is, 4% in St. Louis. It looks like 6-7% in Chicago. And it is about that in Philadelphia. But then all of a sudden, 15 to 20% out of Pittsburgh, out of Detroit, 10 to 12% out of Milwaukee, 20% plus out of Atlanta. These out of Fulton County, these numbers just don't. And how do they keep happening magically in exactly the margins they need? I mean, that's in places that just across the border are voting the opposite direction. So these are things that do not add up. Again, there are 15 bellwether counties that have consistently predicted the election for the last 60 years. All of them vote for Trump, sometimes by big margins. And somehow Biden wins for the first time ever. That the person who lost the most counties of any presidential winner in history.
Yeah.
And yet he got the most votes in history.
64% Trump won in Juneau County, Wisconsin. 64%. Look, there's just too much for me to. I can't overlook I just can't overlook that stuff.
And again, I would accept that maybe I was wrong if they would have allowed. I told very key people, like toward the top, that I said if they do the signature matches, then maybe they just stole this the old-fashioned way, legally. You know, they figured out a way to do it within the rules, or that you could, or that would not get caught. But once they wouldn't do a single signature match check in a single county in a single contested swing state. Yeah. And by the way, that's what convinced Trump. That's why, Trump wasn't doing any interviews for several weeks. He was willing to say, hey, maybe these guys stole it from me legally. All right, I'll deal with it next time. Well, we'll come back at him twice as strong. But he was looking, I believe, at the same metric. And when he saw they're not doing any signature match checks anywhere, he knew they just stole it from him. And that's why he's letting the whole world know that the court system is going to get exposed unless they give him remedy. Republican state legislatures are going to get exposed unless they give him remedy. Republican governors are going to get exposed unless they give him remedy. And Republicans in the House and Senate are going to get exposed. And that's why they should force it all the way through, make Pelosi co-opt the process, probably unconstitutionally, to complete the steal if it occurs. Do not, if you're a Republican, allow it to be on your watch that it takes place.
Robert, they built Donald J. Trump built the strongest Republican Party ever as a national force. I mean, nobody has ever would have imagined a Republican presidential candidate could get 75 million votes almost across the country. That is unheard of.
He proved that all of the theories about immigration were wrong.
Totally wrong.
It was so badly wrong. It said the way to win Mexican-American voters was appeal to identity politics. Trump said, no, the way to appeal to them is on class issues. And on class issues, they actually agree on immigration, white, black, or brown. And he proved right. I mean, Zapata County, the county named after a Mexican revolutionary, Emiliano Zapata. A great revolution, by the way.
Without that swing generally in Western Texas, right? In Western and Southern Texas, without that swing from Mexican Americans, they could have lost that state. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm no joke.
Democrats are terrified because their whole predicate of winning Texas was a combination of suburban voters and Mexican American voters.
That's right.
And they just saw half of that coalition go bye-bye.
Collapse.
So bad that people like Rachel, I think Bykofer, whatever her name is, all of her predictions end up horrendously wrong. Can't understand what happened with Mexican American voters. So she's now saying, oh, it must be because Mexican American men are just low information voters who buy dumb things. And Barack Obama's busy insulting them. Barack Obama's running around saying, oh, they're just a bunch of religious kooks who believe all this nuts. That's a sign that they were completely unprepared and how powerful the Trump coalition is, because he showed that with a class-based appeal, just like Democrats and people did with second generation Irish and Italian immigrants, and then ultimately Eisenhower, Nixon style Republicans did with that group. They showed that you can win over immigrant voters once they're second or third generation, because they'll vote based on class, not based on their immigration identity. And that's why, what do you think Joe Biden's first act is? To try to get as many illegals registered as possible. And that's why Georgia really is a must-win hole.
To replace.
You got to win at least one of those two seats. Really, you need both of them, and to be on the safe side of the aisle, because Biden's already pitching that he's going to try to bribe a Republican senator in a Democratic state with a cabinet position.
Yep. Yeah, it's folks. Some of the stuff that I'm hearing about their reactions to, I didn't understand Biden would do this. I didn't. What election were you paying attention to? You should get some better news sources. You got to laugh at the Aaron Brockoviches, Robert.
They were manipulating the algorithms. So your voter that's marginally involved, that pays a little bit of attention, but mostly finds politics boring, corrupt, or crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's where Facebook was manipulating their news feeds. Twitter was manipulating their Twitter feeds. Google was manipulating their Google search engines, I think specifically in those locations. They've been experimenting. Research Dr. Robert Epstein on the left, documenting. They've been doing this now for 20 years. Where they've been seeing, if we just send a message to register to vote to you, but not to this person over here with the same demographics, does it change who registers to vote? And they found they could move at least 1% of the vote merely by who they notify to vote. And this election, I had Democratic friends tracking this, Democratic family members tracking this. If you were identified as a younger Democrat, you were getting bombarded with vote registration and vote messages 4 to 5 every day for a month. And my guess is you'll find it was very targeted and tailored where it occurred. And it might explain some of these otherwise difficult anomalies to describe. Put it this way, historically unprecedented anomalies took place that in any other election, any other part of the world, we would say screams of fraud and systemic irregularity.
Absolutely. If this, again, I'll repeat it again. If this was any other country, an emerging democracy, a Latin country to the south, nobody likes that leader. Whoever they choose to pick on at the State Department, and whatever straw man they find, they got a million of them. They've been doing it for years. All the years I've been doing this, I went and looked at my inbox. I found a couple about Russia. It was like every time Putin was up for re-election, they called Maduro corrupt too. Whether or not there's never any
Evo Morales. They said Evo Morales had stolen the vote.
That's right.
And now, clearly, by the way, it turned out Evo Morales hadn't. Populism is just on the left in Latin America for a whole lot of reasons. In part, the church's questionable politics down there and so forth. Because
they ate it down there.
Yeah, the church stole a lot of land, helped kill a lot of people. So, there's reasons for why populism is on the left in Central Latin America. There's not a pretty history with aspects of the right down there. There's too few would-be Mussolinis lurking down there. So but they would call this invalid almost anywhere because it does not meet it does not meet our own United States Election Commission standards for transparency in an election. It's ridiculous what's taking place. And the media is also gaslighting about history. Congress resolved the presidential election of 1800. Congress resolved the presidential election of 1824. Congress resolved the presidential election of 1876. The U.S. Supreme Court resolved a state election contest issue in 2000. Absolutely. So we've been down this path before, and we chose the state legislatures. The reason why the Constitution chose the state legislatures, they're the closest to the people. So and then the second backup choice is the House of Representatives by state delegation, protects state autonomy, and again, has the part of the federal government most connected to the ordinary voter because of their 2-year cycles and the number of people who are elected from it. They represent a smaller group than senators mostly, are able to make the decision. So we have people in positions of power to make a difference. And if they choose not to exercise it, that should be on them. But the pressure should continue to be on them to make it, because if the law and the facts were properly applied, an honest vote and illegally, with all the rules are enforced, would show Donald Trump won the election.
Yeah, and again, the importance of doing that poll, because you can't leave this up to them, because they push. I've been saying this. I'm going to repeat it again. If you cannot poll an election correctly, you can't poll anything correctly. If you can't get vote preference correct, you can't get issue preference correct. You can't get policy correct. Nothing you do matters, because the election is the only test of our accuracy. That is it. There's no way to confirm whether a pollster is right or wrong about what they're finding about any public sentiment whatsoever. The only thing we have is a ballot test. That's all. And whether or not you project the right winner and you project the margin within reason, or close, how accurate you are in doing that. So far, the only pollsters to add to this conversation simply did not. I mean, Robert, our national poll for the Epoch Times 6 weeks before the election is going to be more accurate than the New York Times, who did it about 6 days before the election. I mean, it's not even close. There really is only a handful of us now. That's it.
Absolutely. I mean, Susquehanna was close. Trafalgar was close. Basham was close. But frankly, you were the most accurate in all these states for the fourth straight cycle. Yeah. And that's why it's insane that and that's why everybody out there should harass their local Republican, anybody they know. Why aren't people like Richard Baris hired by campaigns? Why are the same old bums being hired? Why is some idiot going to hire Frank Luntz in the next cycle? I mean, this is ridiculous at this point. So we need to have competent people in a decision-making role giving information, because you have people like the governor of Arizona. I have no doubt his political people told him, oh, no, you have to certify. It'll be so key. Your whole legacy will be ruined if you don't. Bad advice. And so they need to get good advice with good polling. So supporting what Richard's doing is critical to show. And what everybody did supporting the Public Opinion Project before the election showed what honest polling could produce. It could produce an extremely accurate, in every case, result inside the margin of error.
Yep.
Every single
state.
And in every case, in most cases, your average rate was within a half a point of the result.
Yeah.
Even results that I was, not looking forward to seeing, like Minnesota, he was behind, and Michigan, he was behind more than Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were right on the edge, and that Arizona was close, but that Florida was going to be safe, Ohio was going to be safe, Iowa was going to be safe. I made money betting on all those. So that's how I somehow made money in this election again, to have an undefeated president or any election betting cycle period, because all the senators came through, House members came through, people who were following this channel for the last 3 months have made tons of cash, not only in the bets leading up to this, but in the bets, all the House bets. It was like money. Oh,
the House was the gold mine this time. I mean, this was a very typical incumbent re-election cycle. That's what it looks like, where the incumbent gets killed in that first term, midterm, and when they're re-elected, they take back power that they lost. They largely stave off challenges in the upper chamber, and they take state legislatures or keep them, right? That is what it looks like. This is not the election cycle of a defeated president.
Anywhere from +0 to +2. And that's about exactly where it's going to come in, especially when you factor out the uncontested races, which had, again, another slight Democratic edge. You factor that out, you're going to end up with, D +1.5.
That's right. Yeah.
That's with some of those ballots were added ballots.
Oh, let's be real here. I mean, right. And they haven't, I don't know, some people haven't called Mike Garcia's race out yet. That race is over. I don't know where Smith could gain anymore. Looks like, we did. That's done. All right. But New York, that's out there. I mean, this is really just getting crazy. I mean, we could talk about it forever, but this is nuts. We can't. Oh, no, it looks like I haven't called it from Mike Garcia. However, he has declared victory, and I believe she congratulated him, even though what happened is, for people who aren't following, California 25, Ventura came in. It was very good for Mike Garcia. And then you had some precincts left in the LA suburbs that really Smith needed to win handily, and she won them by like 50.2. It was not good. Like, she needed a net of more than 40 votes, which is all she got. And if that's going to be her margin for the rest of it, she's not going to catch up with what's remaining, 400 left. And then, Robert, we should have spent some time, but let me just name a few here. California, 48, Florida, 27. These were some, I mean, look, Stu Rottenturd is going to have to change the name of his website all over again because every single likely and lean, which should have been competitive, was a wrong call. And Republicans won every single one of them.
Way wrong. Remember Dave Wasserman was quoting the House polls?
What a loser.
The election wasn't going to be close. Well, both of them were wrong, Davey boy. Even though, some of them are nice people, and Larry Sabato's crew, a good number of them follow me, but they weren't close. The crystal ball has been broken.
I call them the tiny crystal balls.
Yeah, in a row. The desk was way wrong in their forecast. Yep. 538, complete joke. Nate Cohn, complete joke. Cook political report, complete joke. Every single toss-up ends up going Republican, and every single one. Every state congressional district they said was narrow Republican. The average Republican margin is by 9 points. They were way wrong on the House, way wrong on the Senate, wrong on the governorships. Republicans did net one with flipping Montana. Wrong on state legislatures where Republicans gained, not lost 4 or 5, right, which is huge because of the census coming up, 2022. With how apportionment's going to happen.
It's unbelievable.
A judge for the Supreme Court in North Carolina that's going to change because it was that Democratic Supreme Court that kept redrawing.
They're trying to take that here. They're running the headlines now saying he's trying to oppress black votes because these black votes don't count, right? But no more than a week ago, she didn't want all these Republican provisionals counted, right? So, it's just ridiculous, but I don't know how you find another 500 votes. It's very close, but you would need, of course, to net a big chunk. We talked to the State Board of Elections. It's in the recount, obviously, now, but there is nothing left that's going to magically appear. So they need to DQ some ballots in order to kill him to end it. That's where they're at. But yeah, these guys down the line, Florida 27 was likely Democrat on 2 and solid Democrat on 1. And of course, Shalala went down. These guys are never going to be more accurate until the polls are more accurate, because I have said this for years. It's 100% true. There is no secret sauce Cook Politico Report is putting in to what they, which district is lean, whatever. They are poll readers. It's that simple. And if their PVI is D+5 and the generic ballot is D+5, then they're looking at a win of about D+10 in a normal national mood, and they're going to rate that one likely Democrat. That's it. You can do it too, folks. You don't need to waste your money to subscribe to their phony little model. It's not a model. You could do it too. There's nothing special about what they do.
Republicans could have taken the House had the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee and the RNC not been incompetent. Man. There were several seats where they chose the wrong candidate that they could have prevailed. You look at even some of these very low-funded Republicans who either got very close, a few even won, that they said had no chance in seats that were Trump-leaning seats. Yep. Clearly that because of the huge surge of Trump voters that was going to help Republicans down ballot more than Republicans have ever helped Trump. Yeah. He's always added he's added more to the Republicans, as you pointed out, than the Republicans have ever added to him. But because of that, if they had put in a different candidate against Slotkin in Michigan, if they would have put in a different candidate on other key seats that went to Trump again this cycle, they could have flipped those seats. So if Republicans would finally get competent political people in place, a half of this would be fixed. The other half is Trump building a real populist network that's institutionally strong and broad, independent media, independent social media, independent whole network of political advisors and strategists and legal advisors, and a whole legal infrastructure, political infrastructure that is loyal to him and populism. If those two events occur, then whatever happens in 2020, he could come back twice as strong in 2024.
Yeah, or basically somebody he anoints, because it's really, it's on him now. I'll tell you what. Somebody convinces one of his. Well, I have one in mind, but somebody convinced one of his sons to run. I'm telling you, I could win that guy 400 electoral votes plus north. I'm not kidding. He could be a star, man.
Somewhere for 2 years, like 2022, run for good governorship, pick it off, do some good fun
That's
stuff.
right. Yeah.
Platform, and boom.
That's right. I mean, and is the father, he picked it and ran, but he had he's different. He's a different animal. If you're from the Northeast, then you know what I'm talking about. Like the word Trump means like every guy is like, even Barack Obama idolized Donald Trump. All right. He did. All right. We got the first legitimate, honest book about Barack Obama's life after his presidency. And it was by a left winger who wrote it. And he said, look, this guy idolized him. He was like jealous that he was a beta and Trump was an alpha, because look, Obama is a beta, man. I mean, he's as beta as they come. I hate to tell everybody. He's cool. He's got that cool kind of, facade that he puts on, but
and he's
a beta. He is. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Just because they're betas does not mean they're not ruthless. Hey,
that's where most of your stalkers come from. They're
yeah.
beta.
And my competitors in this business, most of them are betas, but they're vicious, ruthless. They have no problem with, and part of that, Robert, they have no problem with like smearing you or, without giving you, professional courtesy or anything. Like they have their agenda. They want to move forward on it. And I really do miss the days of when men had to like pay for being irresponsible for that crap. You know what I mean? I do.
Or if you're Barack Obama, you strictly enforce signature matches to get all of your opponents off the ballot. And in 2008, you threatened to do so to stop Florida from voting in the Democratic primary process.
That's right. That's right. And with this guy, real quick, and then we'll go after this. But speaking of betas, this guy on, I tweeted about it after it happened. We were in Michael's, man, of all places. I'm with my daughter, I'm with my wife, and we're talking to this woman in the aisle, and she's wearing her mask, but it's a little bit down. Some people, it's not mandatory. Not in here. Anyway, this guy like flips out, Robert, and kicks the cart. I thought he threw it. Laura was like, no, he kicked it at her. And at first I thought maybe she knew him and it was a joke, but then he started to get like violent and threatening and stuff. Like I had to.
And he mistook you for a nice data nerd.
He did.
Didn't know that you're really from the Northeast and from the Army.
And I was like, dude, man, you have 3 seconds to vacate the premises before I rearrange your face. I'm like, because now you're
the Leonard Skinner song. Give me 3 steps. Just give me 3 steps.
Give me 3 steps, man.
You got 3 steps, pal. You better get moving.
This is how it's going to be, Robert, where they feel like they can talk to you like that without like penalty or consequence. And they're gonna like, it's like the beta tyrant or something. I don't know what I'm gonna label
they're like
it
the
yet.
weak cub lion who thinks he can run the pack until daddy smacks him across the face.
I guess that's really what it is, man. I guess because that's the society's promoting.
It's like
that
a script
now.
story, right? It's like the Thor's brother that's the weaker person, or it's always that kind of weak, kind of annoying. There was a Rise of the Avengers series that has that story. It's always the sort of weak, jealous type that is that way, that is overly vicious and nasty, but weak in terms of at core.
Right. Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Floki, you can't carry the hammer. Floki.
Exactly.
That's a great
exactly
way
right.
to put it. Man, you nailed it. That's definitely it. All right, folks, look, we're going to wrap, I guess, 5:20. But yeah, don't forget to follow Robert at Barnes_law on Twitter. You can follow me. It's right there. The handle is right there. And of course, YouTube watchers, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go down in the video description. I also sent it out in the comments. So Falk is in there, Free America Law Center. Get involved. And we'll see you guys next Monday. Tomorrow on Inside the Numbers, we'll build the survey. We'll get it started. Sooner the better, right? All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, Robert. I'm going to take us home with the music. All the best, my friend. All the best.
Adios.
The lights that shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway. in the morning